I want you to leave this house." "What?" "Anyway, I've already found someone else for him." My mother-in-law hadn't changed at all. If anything, she had come up with a crazy plan. With a proud look, she said, "You're an awful wife, get a divorce." At that moment, something inside me snapped. "You'll regret saying that." "What? Regret? Why?" "Haha, because this house." My name is Kelly, I'm 34 years old, and after college, I started working as an engineer in a big company. I worked really hard and did my best. It was while working there that I met Tommy, who would later become my husband. I met him when I was 28, and he was a salesman who visited my company often. He was always friendly, greeting me with a smile, even though we didn't work together directly. At a company party, I got to know him better. The person I worked with liked him a lot and invited him to join us. That was when we first had a conversation. We found out we had a lot in common, so we exchanged numbers and started dating. 2 years later, we got married. We've been very much in love and very close since then. Tommy has always supported me, especially when I decided to start my own business. I was thinking about quitting my job to work as a freelance engineer. Tommy asked me, "You want to do this, right? If you feel that way, you should go for it." I'm a cautious person, so I was nervous about whether I could make enough money and if I'd be able to take time off. I was thinking of all the problems that might come up, and I was scared to try something new. But Tommy told me, "Don't worry, I'll support you, even if things are uncertain, just take the chance." So, I quit my job and started freelancing. My business grew much faster than I expected. My experience in a big company made me trustworthy, and I started getting big projects. Now, I earn more than I ever did before. Tommy and I were thrilled to see our savings grow. I was happy with the extra money, but even happier that Tommy had encouraged me to take the leap. With him by my side, I felt like I could face any challenge. We spent time traveling and driving together when he had time off, and even though we saved money, we didn't have to worry about spending on things we wanted. We were enjoying life as a couple. One day, I wasn't feeling well while working at home. After a few days, I went to the hospital for a checkup, and to my surprise, I found out I was pregnant. I couldn't wait for Tommy to come home that evening so I could tell him. When he came home, I told him right away, "Tommy, I went to the hospital today." "Oh, I'm sorry I couldn't go with you. How did it go?" He was hanging up his suit jacket as he spoke. I laughed and said, "They told me I'm pregnant." Tommy stopped what he was doing and looked at me. "What, really?" "Yes," I said, smiling. "Wow, we did it." "Thank you, Kelly," he said, excited. I was so happy to see how thrilled he was. We couldn't wait to welcome our child into the world together. "We'll do our best to raise our child," Tommy said. "Yes, we will take good care of our baby," I replied. We started eating dinner, and Tommy kept talking about the baby, wondering if it would be a boy or a girl and what we'd need for the baby. "If it's a boy, I want to play catch with him. If it's a girl, we'll play house," he said. Then, I told Tommy something I had been thinking for a while. "How about we build a house soon?" "What? We've saved up a lot of money, and with a baby on the way, our current house is too small. It might be a good time to buy a bigger one. The kids will have plenty of room to run around." "Yes, and we'll have a room for the baby, and I'll have a new room for my work," Tommy said. "I love it. It sounds perfect," I replied. "We'll have a big, beautiful house for our baby," Tommy said. We decided to build a new house. On weekends, we went to open houses and worked on the design together. We wanted to have it ready by the time the baby arrived. About a month after we found out I was pregnant, we went to visit my in-laws to tell them the news, but I was feeling a bit down because I didn't really get along with my mother-in-law. Their house was about 30 minutes away, but I didn't visit them often. When Tommy and I first got married, I visited for Thanksgiving and New Year's, but each time, my mother-in-law would criticize me. She'd say women were too focused on their careers and would always ask when I was going to have children. She also complained about my job. "All you do is sit on your computer all day, don't you? I don't like you because you're kind of a nerd. You're not good at talking to people like Tommy. He's a great communicator as a salesman, but his wife is like this." It's not that I'm bad at talking to people. I just love working with computers, and that's why I have this job. My mother-in-law often says hurtful things to me, but only when it's just the two of us. When my husband or father-in-law is around, she acts nice. Every time, I felt upset and started to dislike her more. Over time, I visited her less and tried to avoid her. But this time, We were going to tell her about the baby, so I felt like I had to go. She had been asking when I was going to have kids, and surely she'd be happy to hear the news. I was nervous and unsure, but my husband drove me to my in-laws' house. When we arrived, my mother-in-law, who I hadn't seen in a while, greeted me with her usual blank face, but when my husband spoke to her and said, "Mom, it's been a while," she immediately smiled and started talking cheerfully. She said to me, "It's been a while, I hope you've been well, Kelly." "Oh yes, I've been fine," I answered. "Really? I'm so glad to hear that. Come on in." She invited us inside. Once we were in the living room, my father-in-law greeted us warmly, saying, "Oh, you've come a long way." I was about to sit on the sofa with my husband and talk to my father-in-law, but my mother-in-law asked me to help serve tea. I went into the kitchen, even though I didn't feel good about it. Sure enough, when we were alone, my mother-in-law gave me a cold look and said, "I haven't seen that annoying face in a long time." My mother-in-law used to treat me badly, saying things like, "I wonder if you're still doing that lowly job of yours. I hear you're going to keep working after the baby's born. I hope you're not planning to do something ridiculous like that." She would say hurtful things like that to me, but when we were in the living room with my husband and father-in-law, she would suddenly smile and act like the perfect mother-in-law. When my husband told her I was pregnant, my mother-in-law said something she didn't really mean. "I'm so happy. Thank you, Kelly. I can't wait to see my grandchild. You're such a wonderful daughter-in-law." Her fake attitude confused me, but I had to smile and pretend everything was fine. We had already shared the pregnancy news, so I just wanted to leave. I did my best to respond politely. But something unexpected happened during our conversation. It all started with a casual comment from my father-in-law. "Won't your room be a bit small when the baby comes?" My husband excitedly mentioned building a new house. My mother-in-law jumped in with a surprising suggestion. "What, you're building a house?" she said, clearly excited. I had a bad feeling. Then she said something even more shocking. "Why not make it a two-family house?" My husband and I were both shocked. What do you mean, Mom?" he asked. My mother-in-law continued talking, ignoring our reactions. "Since this house is old, we were thinking about renovating or selling it anyway. If we make it a two-family house, we can help Kelly during her pregnancy, and we can live with our grandkids. Don't you agree, dear?" My father-in-law seemed confused by her idea. "Well, it would be nice to live with the grandkids," he said. Then my mother-in-law, as if she had planned it all along, said, "Exactly. It's not easy when you have a baby. Kelly, you plan to keep working after the baby's born, right? It would be helpful if I lived with you to help with housework and child care." Her pressure made me uncomfortable, but my husband said, "We'll think about it. Now that we've shared the pregnancy news, it's time for us to head home." I was surprised that my mother-in-law was so excited, but I was relieved to know she was happy about the baby. Still, I wasn't sure about living with her, especially since she had treated me so poorly in the past. Since then, my mother-in-law seemed to have changed. She stopped criticizing me and started sending me kind emails, checking on my health. She even sent me sweet texts without saying anything rude. I wondered if she had really changed her attitude. I decided to visit my in-laws for Thanksgiving for the first time in a long time. They were so kind to me, and even when we were alone, my mother-in-law didn't criticize me. After that, she continued to send me kind texts. I started to feel like maybe my mother-in-law had really changed, so when my husband asked about living together with them, I began to think it might be a good idea. The house needed to be ready quickly after the baby was born, so we had to decide what to do with it. I started working with my mother-in-law, who was being so kind to me. I began to think that living in the same house might be okay. I appreciated her help with housework and child care. I could ask her to take care of the baby when I needed to focus on work. I told my husband, "Let's go ahead and build a two-family house." He was surprised. "Are you sure? You don't really get along with my mom, do you?" I was surprised by his question. "What? I don't know. I just think you and Mom haven't always gotten along." I could tell my husband was paying close attention to me. There was still part of me that didn't like her, but recently, she had been really nice to me. I thought maybe we could get along now. "Thank you for saying that. I'm glad you care about my parents. You're right, my mom can be a bit difficult, but I'm sure she'll take good care of the kids." So, we went back to the construction company we had hired and told them we wanted to change the plans to a two-family house. Since we already had the basic floor plans, We just decided to expand the rooms. The new house arrangements went smoothly, and we even visited the construction site with my in-laws. I was excited, thinking how lively our new life would be with the baby and the new house. Months passed, and I was nearing the last trimester of my pregnancy when construction began. I was happy to see my in-laws supporting me, and everything seemed to be coming together. A few months later, I successfully gave birth to a healthy baby girl. My husband and in-laws were thrilled with the birth of our daughter, and all we had to do now was wait for the house to be finished. Finally, the new house was completed. My husband and I took our daughter to the new house. It seemed like my in-laws had arrived just at the same time, and we entered the house excitedly. The house was beautiful and spacious, and just walking through it made me feel so happy. Both my husband and father-in-law were delighted with their own rooms. Then, my mother-in-law called me. "Come here for a minute, Kelly." I thought my mother-in-law was at her own house, but for some reason, she was at ours. I went to the kitchen, where she was waiting. "What's going on, Gemma?" She looked at me coldly and then said something that left me stunned. "I want you out of this house." I couldn't understand what she meant. I froze, confused, and she continued, still looking at me with the same disdain she had always had. "I never wanted to be nice to you, but I pretended to be because Tommy was building me a house. These last 6 months have been tough, but all my efforts have paid off." "What do you mean?" I finally managed to speak, but my mother-in-law just sniffed and went on. "I never liked you. You never quit your job, and when you finally had a child, it was a girl." "Yeah, but you said you'd help me with housework and raising the child." "That was a lie. It was all a lie to get Tommy to do what I wanted. But now that the house is built, you're not needed anymore. Now, get a divorce from Tommy." Then my mother-in-law shocked me even more by saying, "I already have a new wife for him." "What?" "She's the daughter of a friend of mine. She wants to be a housewife, and I'm thinking of having her move in and making her Tommy's wife in this house." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My mother-in-law had not changed at all. In fact, she had come up with an outrageous plan. With a smug look on her face, she told me, "You incompetent wife, get a divorce and leave right now." Something inside me snapped. I had reached my limit with this woman. "You will regret saying that," I replied. She laughed and said, "Regret? Why?" "Haha, because this house." I was about to explain, but then my husband stepped in. "Hey, Mom, I heard what you just said. What do you mean, kicking Kelly out or getting a new wife? Stop saying things like that and causing trouble," he said. My mother-in-law was momentarily upset that he overheard but quickly continued. "I'm saying this for your own good. I don't need this weak woman living in your house. Get a new wife who's young and can give you a son." My husband went pale and confronted her. "What, don't you know? Kelly helped build this house, remember? The house is in her name." "Huh?" My mother-in-law froze, looking confused. "That's a lie, isn't it?" she said. My husband, disgusted, continued, "I've told you before, Kelly's income went up when she started freelancing. I think I remember you saying that." "What? She makes enough to buy a house?" My mother-in-law was stunned. "Yes, Kelly is an excellent engineer. She works with big companies as a freelancer. She gets paid directly." "I'm already disappointed in you. I'm divorcing you," my husband said, his voice steady. "What?" my mother-in-law gasped. "I can't be with someone who doesn't care for the person who's important to my son. When I retire, the person I'm going to spend all my time with will be you, and if that's how it's going to be, I'll be miserable in my old age. You're the one leaving. I'm divorcing you now." "No way." My mother-in-law couldn't even stand up, cowering and crying, but there was no sympathy for her. My husband firmly guided her to my father-in-law's car, and my father-in-law apologized to me before taking her back to their house. He had already planned for their house to be sold, with the move-out date pushed up a week in case things went wrong. In the meantime, he served her with divorce papers, and she was forced to move into a cheap, run-down apartment. Initially, my father-in-law considered leaving our house out of courtesy, but we had no issues with him, so we invited him to stay with us. With my mother-in-law now out of the picture, she had no job and no support, while we had the spacious duplex and a loving family. The marriage between my husband and the acquaintance's daughter was also called off. Not only had she been untrustworthy, but she had also tried to set up my husband with another woman while he was still married. As a result, she quickly lost the trust of everyone around her. I don't know where she is now, but I'm sure her life is far from easy. As for us, we are living peacefully as a family, my husband, father-in-law, and I cherish our daughter, and every day is filled with love and joy. I'm confident that we'll continue to support one another and stay happy together.
This afternoon, my husband casually mentioned that my mom is moving in and instructed me to get all my things out of the room and into the yard before then. I was taken aback, sitting on the couch reading the newspaper, and nearly dropped a plate while doing the dishes in the kitchen. His remark was so unexpected and nonchalant that I was left dumbfounded. Confused, I asked him to clarify. "What do you mean?" He looked at me with a hint of frustration, gripping the newspaper tighter. "Don't you get it? Let me make it simple for you. My mom is moving in. We need the room you're using because she'll need it. So move your stuff to the yard." I was stunned. He had never mentioned this before, and I wished he had at least discussed it with me beforehand. Still, I didn't argue. I just nodded and said, "Okay, I'll move everything out." "Good," he replied. "Make sure you do it quickly. Now you'll have a chance to learn some housekeeping skills for Mom." I was speechless. I knew he was close to his mother, but this felt like an extreme measure. I must have been too shocked to respond. It was clear he had asked her to move in without prior notice, and the suddenness of it all left me feeling helpless. With a forced smile, I agreed. "Got it, I'll get everything out." As soon as the conversation ended, I pulled out my smartphone and made a call. I wasn't going to let this go unaddressed. My husband looked at me, puzzled. "Who are you calling?" he asked, but I didn't bother explaining. "Hey, I'm back," I heard a voice call out as soon as my husband Tom returned from work. Tom and I had been married for 2 years. We met shortly after I graduated college and started working for an apparel company, and we quickly fell in love and married. "Welcome home," I greeted him, rushing from the living room to the entrance. "How was your day? What about dinner?" It was a routine I followed to avoid upsetting my domineering husband. "I'm starving. Let's eat first," he said, and I hurried to prepare dinner. "Grilled fish tonight. Looks delicious. Let's eat while it's still hot." We had a pleasant dinner and conversation, but things shifted when I brought up a thought I'd been having. I've been thinking about going back to work soon. We don't have kids yet, and our savings are dwindling. Tom's calm demeanor changed instantly. "Why would you want that?" he asked sharply. "I just think it might help if we increase the household budget a little. That way, I wouldn't need to work," I explained. "Are you saying my income isn't enough?" he snapped. "That's not what I meant at all," I defended. "I'm just suggesting that if the budget were slightly better, I wouldn't need to go back to work." Tom responded curtly, "I give you $250 every month. Isn't that enough?" I had always intended to continue working, but the conversation took a turn I hadn't anticipated. Before we got married, I had made it clear to my husband that I wanted to have children. He didn't agree, preferring that I focus on staying home. The monthly allowance he provided was just $250, which was unrealistic even though we lived in a house inherited from my late grandfather with no mortgage. $250 a month for 2 people was barely enough to cover the basics. I couldn't help but blurt out my frustration. "We can't live on that." Instantly, I clamped my hand over my mouth. But the damage was done. He reacted with anger, shouting, "Why can't you make it work? Where is all that money going? My mom said she could manage on that much." His reaction was fueled by a sense of obligation to his mother. After losing his father in a traffic accident during middle school, he had been raised by her, and it seemed he had developed a deep reliance on her opinions. To him, her word was law, and he expected me to follow it as well. I, too, had lost a parent, my father, when I was in high school, and had been raised by a single mother. But I knew that not all of her opinions were correct. I felt my appetite vanish as I said, "I'm going to bed," and watched him storm off to his room, leaving his meal untouched. The loud footsteps in the hallway seemed deliberately forceful. I questioned myself, wondering why I had married this man. Others might say I should leave him, but despite everything, I still loved him. He was usually a decent person, and I wished he would focus on our relationship rather than his mother. I silently hoped that one day he would turn away from his mother's influence and truly connect with me. With a heavy heart, I began cleaning up dinner, clinging to a faint hope. A few months later, an incident occurred that would irreparably damage our relationship. At dinner, he suddenly announced, "My mother is coming over next Saturday. Make sure you clean up properly." I was caught off guard and replied, "I haven't seen your mother in a while, so I'm a bit nervous." "She's perfect, so just remember that," he said dismissively. I disliked my mother-in-law, and his casual tone only added to my frustration. I hadn't seen her since our wedding, and her condescending behavior and the dissatisfaction she expressed towards me were unforgettable. I recalled her words when I first visited their home for the wedding introduction. "So, you're the one engaged to my son? You seem quite dull. Are you sure you're suitable to marry him?" Back then, I managed to laugh it off, but hearing such a comment directly from her, someone I had just met, left a lasting scar on my heart. I never imagined that such a mother-in-law would come to my house. My husband seemed excited about her visit, cheerfully enjoying dinner while I was overcome with anxiety. My hands were trembling, and I nearly dropped my chopsticks. I was terrified of meeting her, but refusing to meet her would only displease my husband. He soon noticed my unease. "Hey, you okay? You look pale. Are you feeling sick?" I considered saying no, to refuse the meeting with my mother-in-law, but the words that came out were not what I felt. "No, I'm fine really. I'm looking forward to her visit," I lied, not wanting to upset him. He seemed relieved. "You're excited too, right?" "Yeah, I'm excited," I replied, though inside, I was battling my frustration at my own weakness. I forced a smile to avoid his anger and finished dinner. "Thanks for the meal. I'm going to take a bath and sleep," I said. "Okay, good night." I didn't want to think about the impending visit and went to bed early. Yet when I woke up the next morning, I still felt unsettled. As Saturday approached, my health seemed to deteriorate. I never anticipated that meeting her would affect me so deeply. When the day finally arrived, my husband went to pick up his mother, and I waited nervously at home, having cleaned the house meticulously. The doorbell rang in the quiet room, and I jumped up. "She's here," I thought, hurrying to the door. As I opened it, I was greeted with, "Yasmin, it's been a while." "Yes, it has been a while," I managed to reply. But as soon as I faced my mother-in-law, my heart began to pound, and I could feel a tightness in my chest. I was frozen, standing like a statue, until my husband, who had followed behind, prompted me. "What are you doing, Yasmin? If you stand there, my mother can't get in. Please let her in." "Oh, sorry," I stammered, snapping back to reality. "Please come in." I finally led my mother-in-law inside, my heart racing with anxiety about what she might say. The hallway leading to the living room, though short, felt endless. To my surprise, she didn't make any harsh comments as she followed me into the living room. It was cleaner than I had expected, and I thought, maybe I'll avoid any harsh remarks after all. The conversation that followed was more subdued than I anticipated. About 3 hours into her visit, the topic of my husband came up. "You know," she said, "I was surprised you asked Tom to give you more for living expenses." "I didn't ask for more," I corrected. "I just mentioned that I needed a bit extra. There's a difference." Her eyes shifted towards Tom for confirmation. "That's not what Tom told me," she said, clearly seeking his support. We had indeed discussed the issue a few months ago, but I had never demanded anything. "Really, Mom, it's terrible," Tom interjected. "I've been giving her money every month. I can't believe this." His words hit me like a shockwave. Was he trying to curry favor with his mother? "Tom says the same," she continued. "You don't even have a mortgage. How much are you getting for living expenses?" $250 a month, I said. "Even you should understand that's not enough. You've managed a household budget and raised children yourself. You know how difficult it is to live on such a small amount." I was confident she would understand, but her reaction was unexpected. $250? You're getting that much and still asking for more? Where is all the money going?" "Food and daily necessities," I explained. "I don't waste money. The utility bills alone are more than $250, so I've been using my savings." But like Tom, my mother-in-law wasn't sympathetic. "You could manage with a bit more savings. You need to be more resourceful. Ideally, I'd be there to guide you on the right way." The suggestion was clear. Living with her was out of the question. I responded with a forced smile. "Maybe you're right. I'll try to be more resourceful." Tom looked oddly pleased. "Mom's saying this, so why not live together? She can teach you how to manage finances." No way, I thought. I can't handle any more stress. I'm already walking on eggshells around Tom, and adding my mother-in-law into the mix would be unbearable. I'd rather not. I clearly expressed my refusal to my husband, but his annoyance was evident. "What, you're rejecting my suggestion? That's exactly what's wrong with you. Mom's just trying to be kind. Let's drop this, Mom," he said, turning to her. "Talking to her is pointless. Let's go." He stood up, and together with my mother-in-law, they left the living room. Once they were gone, I felt drained and overwhelmed. My husband, a stable salaried worker earning around $2,000 a month, shouldn't find a slight increase in living expenses problematic. Why was he so reluctant? There had to be a reason. Feeling unwell, I decided to take a nap. When I awoke, it was already deep into the night. "What time is it?" I wondered, seeing that it was past midnight. I must have slept for hours. My husband had returned and was already asleep in the bedroom, perhaps not waking me out of consideration. My body ached from sleeping on the couch, and I realized it was pointless to do anything at this hour. I crawled into bed and closed my eyes again. The next morning, my husband's announcement was unbelievable. "Mom's moving in this afternoon. By then, get all your stuff out in the yard," he said casually while reading the newspaper on the couch. I was in the kitchen doing dishes after breakfast when I accidentally dropped a plate, which shattered loudly. "Move everything out into the yard?" I asked, bewildered. I approached him for clarification. "Huh? What do you mean?" I inquired, confused. He looked at me with irritation, gripping the newspaper tightly. "You don't get it. I'll say it again, slowly for your benefit. My mother is moving into this house. Got it? It's an absurd idea, but you need to understand." My mind struggled to process the situation. He had never mentioned this before. I wished he had discussed it with me. Despite my shock, I listened without arguing. "She needs a spare room," he continued. "That's why we're using your room. If there's stuff in the way, just put it all out in the yard. Lucky you, now you can learn housekeeping from her." I was left speechless. I knew my husband had a strong attachment to his mother, but this was crossing the line. It seemed clear that he must have already discussed living together with her when he returned yesterday. I was stunned by the sudden decision for his mother to move in. Nothing else seemed to matter anymore. "Fine, I'll put everything out," I said, barely containing my frustration. "Got it. Make sure you do it right." The moment our conversation ended, I pulled out my phone and made a call. I wasn't going to let this go without a response. My husband looked at me, puzzled. "Who are you calling?" he asked, but I ignored him. I meant what I said. I would move everything out, but I didn't want to live with a mama's boy any longer. If his mother was that important, they could be together. My anger had turned into a deep resentment. "Yes, that's right, including the land." "Yes, please," I continued, speaking to the real estate agent. My husband's voice grew louder and more impatient as he shouted, "Are you even listening? Stop making calls on your own." I continued talking, undisturbed. This house, inherited from my grandfather, was now my property, and I had the right to do whatever I wished with it. If my husband and mother-in-law were making unilateral decisions, so could I. After ending the call, I finally turned to my husband. "Stop it. You're being so noisy. Can't you see I'm on the phone? It's incredibly rude." "What kind of way is that to talk to your husband?" he snapped back, clearly annoyed. "I can't stand this any longer," I retorted. "You act so superior, but you don't even contribute properly to our living expenses. How are you any better? You make nearly $2,000 a month but only give me $250. Where is the rest of the money going? Are you having an affair or something?" His face turned red with rage. He slammed the newspaper onto the floor and grabbed me by the collar. "An affair? Don't joke about that. Why would you accuse me of that when I'm working hard every day?" Despite his anger, I remained calm. "Then why don't you contribute more to our household? If you're not doing anything wrong, there's no reason you can't. I'm not asking for all your salary, nor have I restricted your allowance." His tone softened slightly. "Well, yes, but men have their own social obligations," he said, still defensive. "I see, so you expect me to handle everything at home while you enjoy yourself outside. I'm just a convenient housekeeper to you." His grip on my collar loosened, indicating I had hit a nerve. He attempted to change the subject, but I was clear. "Anyway, my mother will be moving in today. I might increase the living expenses a bit," he said, heading back to the living room. I called after him. "That's fine, but I'm not planning to live together. If you really want to live here with your mother, I'll leave." He turned back, clearly surprised. I couldn't imagine continuing to live with him and my mother-in-law under these circumstances. Exhausted from this life, I kept my gaze cold. He noticed and approached me again. "Are you really going to leave?" "Of course. I'm leaving right away," I replied firmly. "Just wait a moment." I went to my room and returned with copies of the petition for divorce, marriage certificate, and summons from the court. I handed them to him as he slumped on the sofa. Here, look at these. Are you sure about this? Don't come back regretting it. I have no regrets, I said, my voice steady. Just read it carefully and respond to the court. My determination is firm. I just want to cut ties with this mama's boy as quickly as possible. From now on, I'll leave everything to my lawyer. Well, thank you for everything, I added, preparing to leave with my belongings. There's no alimony, right? I haven't done anything wrong, I asked, making sure. Sure, that works for me, he replied, relieved. To avoid any trouble later, let's agree in writing not to divide any assets. His face softened, clearly relieved not to have to pay alimony. We signed an agreement to forgo any alimony and not to divide any property. This formalized the end of our marriage. An hour later, just as I was about to leave with my packed belongings, my mother-in-law arrived. Where are you going with all that luggage? She asked. I'm leaving this house, I said. Please discuss the details with Tom. I wish you both happiness, I said with a smile, feeling the sense of liberation. The prospect of never seeing them again made my heart lighter. The world outside seemed brighter than ever. It had been a long time since I felt this clear-headed. First, I went to see my lawyer to discuss the next steps, then visited a real estate agent to arrange a new flat. I couldn't move in immediately, so I spent the week in a hotel. I hadn't heard from my ex-husband, and I figured he and his mother were probably settling into their new routine. That was until he called. Speak of the devil, I muttered, answering the phone. He sounded furious. What's this about an eviction notice? He shouted. Calm down. What's happened? I replied, brushing my teeth in the bathroom. I set the phone down to rinse my mouth, but his angry voice still reached me faintly. What are you doing? This isn't a joke, he snapped. I picked up the phone again and moved to the bedroom. You never change, always so angry, I said, but let it go. Never mind that. Answer me, he demanded. All right, the eviction notice. The house you and your mother are living in no longer belongs to anyone. That's probably why you received it, I explained. He seemed bewildered. You don't understand, so we'll explain again, I said firmly. I hold the rights to that house. It's now owned by the real estate company and is going to be sold. No way. That's so unfair. You didn't tell me about something this important, he yelled, shocked and enraged. You didn't share anything significant with me either. You decided to live with your mother without consulting me. It's too late now. If you don't hurry up with the move-out process, you'll be reported, I said coldly. That house was our joint property. You can't just sell it like that. It's invalid. Cancel it, he protested. Are you stupid? Did you forget we both signed an agreement that there would be no division of assets? That house was mine from the start, and I can do whatever I want with it, I said, pushing him away. His reaction confirmed he had completely forgotten the terms of the contract. His disregard for everything related to me had worn me down. I felt a wave of disappointment as I tried to end the call. Are we done? Do you understand now? This is the last time I'm discussing this, I said, preparing to hang up. Hey, wait, we have nowhere to go if we get kicked out suddenly, he exclaimed. That's not my problem. You've been stingy all this time, so you must have plenty of money. Figure it out. Why don't you rent a flat or a house? I responded coldly before ending the call. His once assertive tone faltered, and he began stumbling over his words. I don't have any money. I don't have any savings. I can't believe it. How can an adult have no savings at all? How unplanned can he be? My indignation flared. If he'd been in front of me, I might have struck him. Really hopeless, I muttered, shaking my head. I was right to divorce you. You're old enough to have savings, yet you contributed nothing to living expenses and just squandered money. There's no way I'm helping you. His pleading only steeled my resolve. Please, just a little bit, he started. Why don't you ask your mother? That's a good idea. So goodbye, mama's boy. Don't ever contact me again. I ended the call with finality and immediately blocked his number. Why should I help someone like him? If he seriously thought he'd get aid from me, he was mistaken. After everything was settled, I lay down on the soft bed of my new place, gazed at the ceiling, and proudly gave it the middle finger. 2 weeks later, I moved into my new flat. It's smaller than my old house, but it's clean and I feel quite content. My ex-husband and his mother eventually left the house. The real estate agent informed me they resisted initially but vacated when threatened with police involvement. They had underestimated me even after the divorce. I resumed my old job, and the warm welcome from my colleagues was heartening. One day, a colleague invited me to lunch and asked, "Is it okay if I ask why you got divorced?" "Well, it's complicated," I said. "Let's talk about it over drinks sometime. But I do have a question. I haven't seen Tom around lately. What happened?" "Oh right, you don't know," my colleague said, their expression changing. "Tom officially resigned due to distress. But the truth is, he was fired for embezzling company funds. It happened around the time you left." "Embezzlement?" I was stunned. "How much did he embezzle?" "About $220,000, my colleague replied. I was so shocked I stood up, raising my voice. The other diners turned to look at us. "Keep it down," my colleague whispered. "Sorry, but that's a huge amount." "Didn't he get caught?" "The boss wanted to handle it quietly," they explained. "Tom didn't go to the police, but if he doesn't repay the money soon, he might be reported. Those are just rumors though. The full story isn't clear." As I processed the news, I realized it wasn't entirely surprising given his character. Always concerned with appearances and squandering money on socializing, his downfall was predictable. But it was no longer my concern. I'm still young, and I want to build a new life and find happiness with someone who truly cares for me. After talking with my colleague, my resolve to move forward only strengthened. Ever since we exchanged vows, my husband, a classic mama's boy, had been noticeably absent from household chores. His dependence on me became painfully clear when I mentioned an upcoming business trip. Panic set in as he exclaimed, "Who will take care of me while you're gone?" After a heated argument, I left for my week-long journey. When I returned, I found a note next to completed divorce papers. It read, "Since you abandoned the housework, I'm going back to my parents. Consider the divorce papers and think it over." Rage boiled inside me at his audacity to threaten divorce, but as I calmed down, I began to see a glimmer of clarity. Perhaps this was the push I needed. Maybe a divorce wasn't such a bad idea after all. Resolved, I filed the papers the very next day. The following morning, my astonished husband stormed in, demanding to know where the divorce papers were. When I told him I had filed them, he broke down, utterly baffled and crying uncontrollably. "My name is Grace, and at 32 years old, I've been married just over a year. After college, I diligently climbed the ranks at a prominent company. Approaching my 30s without a romantic partner, my parents pressured me to settle down, leading me to reluctantly join a dating agency. That's where I met Edward, a soft-spoken man a few years younger than me who worked at a mixed firm. We connected over several dates, and his respectful demeanor made me think he was the one. When he proposed, I was overjoyed, envisioning a life together. However, our marriage unveiled challenges I hadn't anticipated. After our engagement, during a visit to my parents, they impressed upon us that marriage is a lifelong commitment. "Grace, always be there for Edward," they advised, and I nodded while Edward listened intently. Next, we visited Edward's parents. His father, Arthur, welcomed me warmly, saying, "I've heard so much about you from my boy. It's great to finally meet you." His mother, Michelle, was more reserved, scrutinizing me before asking, "Is this the one?" Edward confidently replied, "Yep, Mommy. I want to marry her." I was taken aback by his use of Mommy and Michelle's bluntness. Arthur quickly stepped in, apologizing for her directness and assuring me, "We're very happy about your marriage, but just so you know, Edward has had it pretty easy here. He might be a bit of a challenge." I reassured them, "I adore Edward's gentle side, and I know we'll support each other." Arthur turned to Edward, urging him to step up and keep me happy. Edward nodded earnestly, and not long after, we celebrated our union with a low-key wedding. To our delight, my parents gifted us a condo, marking the beginning of our married life. However, it soon became evident that Edward was unaccustomed to household responsibilities. One morning, while I was busy with laundry and preparing breakfast, Edward's alarm rang at 8, yet he continued to sleep soundly. Despite my efforts to wake him, he wouldn't budge. Finally, I pulled off his covers and gave him a gentle shake. Slowly, he opened his eyes, groggily exclaiming, "Wow, it's 8:10 already. Why didn't you wake me up?" I reminded him that I had tried and that his alarm was blaring too. "Now please eat your breakfast." As he rubbed his eyes and shuffled to the table, he immediately complained about the eggs. "Hey Grace, this egg is too runny. I can't eat this unless it's well done. Make it over," he demanded, caught off guard while I hung laundry. I struggled to hold back my irritation and snapped, "Then don't eat it. Why would you say that? And this coffee is scorching hot. Mommy always got the eggs and coffee just right." All right, I sighed, quickly redoing the eggs and letting the coffee cool. He ate hurriedly, leaving his plate on the table as he rushed toward the restroom. "Wait up, you know you should clean up after yourself," I called after him, but he dismissed my concerns. "Gee, I'm short on time." Annoyed, I paused my makeup routine to clean the dishes while picking out my outfit. Then he called out again, "Grace, over here. Help with my tie." There he stood, tie hanging limp around his neck, looking utterly helpless. "Seriously, you can't even tie your tie? What did you do before we got married?" "Mommy always did it," he replied sheepishly. With a deep exhale, I tied his tie and somehow we both managed to leave the house. This had become our routine. He never helped with any housework, and it felt like I was juggling everything while babysitting him too. Every time an issue arose, it was always, "Mommy did it this way," or "With Mommy, it went like that," always referencing his mother Michelle. This pattern dragged on for a year, and as the pressures mounted, thoughts of divorce began to creep into my mind. My father's insistence that marriage is forever echoed in my thoughts, tempering my frustrations. However, an unexpected hiccup at work led to a week-long business trip starting the next day. When I broke the news to my husband that evening, he paused his video game, clearly surprised. "Hold up, a business trip for a whole week? It's out of my hands. Work's calling," I explained. "No way. Who's going to cover for you here for a week?" he asked, irritation creeping into his voice. "You'll have to step up. It's about time you got a grip on the household duties," I responded, and he set down his controller, locking eyes with me. Isn't the wife supposed to care for her husband in the house? Are you just bailing on that? His question was steeped in outdated expectations. Seriously, that's such old school thinking. We both have jobs. We should be a team, I countered. That's not how I see it. Mommy was always on top of things at home, he retorted. I couldn't help but point out, but she was a stay-at-home mom. Honestly, it's kind of odd hearing an adult man constantly talk about Mommy. He bristled at my words. What's your deal? Taking shots at me and my mommy? I'm not, but let's be real. You're a mama's boy. This is how you see me. You think you can talk to me like that? His defensiveness escalated, and I felt my frustration peak. Face it, you're a mama's boy. You can't get up without help. You can't even tie your tie. And you won't lift a finger around the house. You're constantly comparing me to your mom. For once, handle your stuff. Really? You're going to come at me like that? That's why I was iffy about marrying someone older. Should have sided with Mommy and chosen a younger, perkier girl, he shot back. His words struck a nerve, and our conversation spiraled into a major blowout. Even joking, you shouldn't say stuff like that. We're married, I said, trying to anchor the conversation to the commitment we had made to each other. The tension was palpable, revealing the deep rifts that had formed in our relationship. When my husband hinted at divorce during our heated argument, I was taken aback. With a smug tone, he challenged, You can't possibly want a divorce, can you? You wouldn't want to be labeled divorced. And think about what your dad said about sticking together. Then, with a sharp edge, he added, Well, I just did. If you go on this business trip and leave me here alone, I'm seriously considering a divorce. With those words, he stormed off to our bedroom, leaving me stunned. Despite the shock, the idea of divorce lingered in my mind, a thought I had previously wrestled with, fearing I would disappoint my parents. But now it seemed like a viable option to consider seriously. Heavy with these thoughts, I went to bed. The next day, I woke early to prepare for my trip. The fallout from our argument still weighed heavily on me, but I had work commitments to attend to. I nudged Edward, who was still curled up under the covers. I'm heading out. You better wake up or you'll be late for work. His response was a sleepy mumble, unintelligible and dismissive. Rolling my eyes, I left. A few hours later, a text from him popped up on my phone. You barely tried to wake me. Now I'm running late. Did you really go on that trip? I quickly replied, I did wake you up, and yes, I'm on my trip. I'll be back in a week. He read my message but didn't reply. Mid-trip, I decided to call my parents to update them on Edward's behavior and share my growing inclination toward divorce. I braced myself for a lecture, unsure how they would react to the possibility of our marriage ending. The call was going to be difficult, but I needed their advice and support. Their response took me by surprise. We had no idea he behaved like this. Take your time to think, but don't force yourself to stay in a situation that isn't right. Always remember, we're in your corner, no matter what you decide. Their words of unconditional support brought tears to my eyes. Upon returning from my business trip, I felt a mix of clarity and determination. I knew a serious conversation with Edward was inevitable. If he didn't show any signs of change, I was ready to consider divorce more seriously. My mind buzzed with thoughts as I walked into our house late in the evening, only to find Edward wasn't home yet. As I looked around, a set of signed divorce papers and a note on the table caught my attention. The note read, "Since you ditched the housework, I'm heading back to my folks. Check out the divorce papers and think things over." My initial reaction was rage. How dare he threaten me with divorce? But as my anger subsided, I began to see the situation differently. Maybe this was a sign that ending things might not be such a bad idea after all. With that realization, I decided to file the papers. When the divorce was finalized, I felt a heavy weight lift from my shoulders. That evening, I went to bed and slept more soundly than I had in a long time. The next morning, as I enjoyed a peaceful cup of coffee, the door swung open and in walked Edward, clearly upset.
"Why didn't you come to my parents' place to apologize? What's gotten into you?" he demanded, his temper flaring. Then, noticing the empty spot where the divorce papers had been, his expression shifted from anger to shock. "Hold on, where are the divorce papers?" "Oh, I filed them," I replied calmly. "You did what?" He looked as if he had been slapped. "You went through with it. Thanks for signing them. It made everything smoother," I said, trying to keep my composure. "You can't be serious. Did you really go all the way? Have you lost your mind?" he exclaimed, unable to hide his astonishment at my decisiveness. Seeing how composed I remained sent him into a complete frenzy. "That's it. I'm calling my parents." "Sure, knock yourself out," I replied, unfazed by his threat. I knew I had made the right decision for myself. An hour after the confrontation, I felt a sense of clarity settling in. When Edward's parents, Michelle and Arthur, arrived at our apartment, Michelle immediately spotted me and dramatically exclaimed, "You! How could you just divorce Edward like that? What's wrong with you?" I replied coolly, "If he had the divorce papers all filled out and ready to go, doesn't that suggest he wanted out? Is that a problem? How can you be so bold when you're just his wife?" she shot back. Before the situation could escalate, Arthur intervened, his voice firm. "Enough." The room fell silent as he turned to me. "Grace, can you walk us through what happened?" I agreed and began to detail the ongoing issues, our argument before my trip, and the divorce papers Edward had left for me. I was at my wit's end. It seemed like he wanted a divorce, so I went with it. I maintained eye contact with Arthur, hoping to convey the depth of my frustration. Just as I finished, Edward interjected, "Mom, Dad, come on, can't you see she's out of line? Tell her off." Michelle quickly sided with Edward. "Oh, Edward, my poor baby, she's being so hasty. You should reverse the divorce right now." "There's no reversing it. Our divorce is final. We're strangers now," I stated firmly. Michelle's face turned red, and she opened her mouth to respond. But once again, Arthur cut her off. "Zip it, Michelle." He then turned to me, apologizing for Edward's behavior. Then facing Edward, whose eyes were wide with surprise, Arthur continued, "You bonehead. I knew you had issues, but this, using divorce papers as a threat, unbelievable. You had it coming." Michelle tried to interject, but Arthur wouldn't let up. "It's partly on you, Michelle. You spoiled him. Watch out. If you keep this up, I might divorce you too." The tension in the room was palpable as Arthur confronted the reality of the situation, leaving Edward and Michelle speechless. After the intense discussion, Michelle appeared visibly shaken, her mind lingering on Arthur's unexpected threat of divorce. She murmured to herself, troubled. Arthur then turned his attention back to me, his expression marked by sincere regret. "Grace, I deeply regret the trouble our clueless son has caused you. It's clear he has a lot to learn. Please move on and find happiness in your life," Arthur implored, his concern genuine. I thanked Arthur for his understanding and watched as he left, taking a dejected Edward with him. It didn't take long for the news to spread through our circle. Arthur had decided to sever financial and emotional ties with Edward, a drastic move aimed at pushing him towards self-sufficiency. Soon after, Edward's life spiraled downward. He moved into a modest, somewhat neglected apartment, his first experience living truly on his own. The transition was anything but smooth. His new home quickly descended into chaos, mirroring his disorganized personal life. With no one to rely on and a habit of tardiness, he soon found himself unemployed, unable to adhere to a schedule. Meanwhile, the dynamics within his family deteriorated further. Michelle, who had always meddled in Edward's affairs, crossed boundaries one too many times, resulting in a serious fallout with Arthur. This ultimately led to their separation. Michelle moved in with Edward, and together they struggled to find stability, scraping by with low-end jobs. Their lives became a series of unfortunate events and poor decisions with no clear path to improvement. In stark contrast, my life took a different turn. Free from the daily stresses and emotional drain of my relationship with Edward, I found myself alone in our condo, which now felt surprisingly spacious and full of potential. With renewed energy and focus, I dedicated myself to my career. The absence of Edward's negative influence allowed me to excel at work, and my professional life flourished as a result. Feeling liberated and optimistic, I embraced my newfound independence. My living space transformed into a true sanctuary where I could relax and plan for the future. The improvement in my work life was palpable. Each day brought a sense of excitement and anticipation for what lay ahead. The contrast between my thriving existence and Edward and Michelle's downward trajectory was stark. While they were no longer a part of my life, the lessons learned from our time together resonated deeply, reinforcing my commitment to personal growth and happiness.
This is the last present I will ever give you. My husband shoves divorce papers to me. I've decided to marry someone else. So thank you for being a cash dispenser until now. The guy I have been with for so many years turns out to be a horrible person. This is a story of my revenge. My name is Jessica. I'm turning 50 this year. In fact, tomorrow is a little special day. I'll be living in debt for a long time and will finally finish paying it off. My husband Lance and I have worked really hard together. We got married 20 years ago. I was 30 and he was 35. He ran a liquor store that he inherited from his parents who had passed away. I, on the other hand, was an office worker. We met through an acquaintance and started dating with marriage in mind. I had one concern back then. What if he asked me to run the store with him? I was working as a financial consultant who advised on insurance and investment to individual and corporate clients at the time. I was getting paid better than average 30-year-olds and loved my job. I was studying for certification to take my career to the next level when he proposed to me. He said, "I know you have been working hard to get the certification. I want to support you in any way I can. I have enough staff at the store so I can manage it myself. You should pursue your dreams." His assurance was a catalyst for my decision to marry him. He was benevolent and always on my side. I truly wanted to build a life with such a man. As we agreed in the beginning, he focused on his business, and I focused on my work. We thought that our marriage was going well. About a year into it, he went to work, and I was spending my day off at home. When I was vacuuming under the bed, it caught a lot of papers. It had been less than 6 months since we moved in. I wondered why there was such clutter. I picked up a crumpled piece of paper and opened it. The header in bold letters jumped into my eyes. Reminder of payment. The total amount of the debt under Lance's name was $200,000. $200,000 was not $2,000, is it? My head started spinning. Why did he hide such a large amount of debt from me? I questioned him as soon as he got home that day. What is this debt? What's going on? No, it's not what you think. It was left to me by my parents. That was not a personal debt, but rather on his liquor store. It was made by his parents, and when he took over the business, it also came along. It was secured by the land and the house we lived in, so he had no intention to renounce the inheritance. I understood that it was not his personal debt, but it was not something that could be left unattended. But this is a payment reminder. Aren't you paying back every month? I am. But sales fluctuate from month to month. Sometimes I can't pay them back during the slow month. I have to pay my staff first, so I've asked them to wait. That's when the letter came. At first, his explanation sounded to make sense. But it was definitely not a good idea to delay payment. The letter included the words "final notice." I didn't tell you because I didn't want you to freak out. Don't worry though. Business is on track, and we haven't been evicted from the house, right? That's true, but... I looked at him anxiously. Then he mentioned something unexpected. If you're so worried, why don't you help me pay it off? You are making quite a lot, aren't you? I wasn't comfortable with where he was going. It was not my store, and a husband and a wife were supposed to help each other. My debt is also yours. That's a bit sudden. Are you okay if my store went out of business? Many people would suffer if it was gone, you know. I guess he was right. His store had become an indispensable part of the community. It was located in the suburbs where there weren't many shops or supermarkets around. He was also selling fresh foods such as meat and fish and offered a home delivery service. I visited the shop several times, and it was always busy. Some customers stated that they were so grateful to have it in the neighborhood. Please, honey, I'll be focused on keeping my business rolling. Please help me pay off my debts. I respected the way he took his work seriously and devoted himself. I didn't want to see his store disappear. I didn't want that to happen for sure. Being married means that we support each other at all times. If you were struggling, it seems only natural for me to help him. Okay, I'll repay back as much as I can every month from my salary. You can concentrate on managing the store. I could help financially, but only he could run it. I was happy that he relied on me above all else. However, it was the beginning of a change in him. About 3 years had passed since I took over his debt. He often came home late. What were you doing until this late? You reek of alcohol. I just had a few drinks with my customers, honey. Did you make a payment this month? For some reason, he sounded condescending. I did last week. Why? The store depends on you. You'd better keep paying on time. Whenever he got drunk those days, he gave me an order. I had taken it as nonsense from a drunkard, but it started to prick my nerves when he did it repeatedly. He made it sound like it was normal for me to pay back his debt. By the way, Matt has a third kid now. I envy him. Matt was his friend from high school. He had his own business, just like Lance. His wife also worked in the store with him. I've been wanting to talk to you about that. I told him what I had been keeping to myself. Don't you think it's time for us to start a family? His reaction was very cold. What? Baby? My business has just started picking up, and we are still in debt. How can we be so irresponsible? That was his stance. I held back my annoyance. Matt has 3 children now, right? We can manage one too. His parents are still well, and his wife works in the store. They are different from us. I couldn't counter that. I'd always thought that I would have children when I got married. My dream was crushed easily, so until I pay off all your debts, we can't have a baby. Well, I guess that's how it's going to be. If you make a lot of money and pay off studies quickly, I will think about it. His mean smile disgusted me, but I felt impatient to pay off the debts as soon as possible. How blind I was. Even though it was an irrational demand, I was still occupied with the thought of starting a family and didn't even think about it. From then on, I worked tirelessly for Lance. I actively obtained qualifications, took promotional exams, and secured a salary increase. I started earning much more than women my age. I even made advance payments, but the debt didn't disappear so easily. I turned 40 before I knew it and had to give up on having children. I thought to myself that I still had my husband and thought he was enough. He relied on me, and I could do anything for him. As long as I still believed that, I remained happy. Lance started coming home later and later as the days went by. He sometimes came back in the morning. I was working in the store, and it was morning when I realized it. I had to go out with a customer, and the next thing I knew, the sun was out. When I saw him working so hard to protect the store, I felt that I had to do my best as a wife too. We were on the same boat, sailing for a better future together. The months and years went by, and the day finally arrived. I was going to make the last payment the next day. For the sake of the debt, I had to pass on all sorts of luxuries I didn't need to do so anymore. I could finally spend my hard-earned money the way I wanted. I realized that ever since I got married, I had been thinking too much about money. We had never taken a vacation or even dined at a nice restaurant. We were still in our 50s. I hoped to finally enjoy such things from then on. On the day the last payment was due, I took a day off. I prepared a more opulent dinner than usual, complete with a bottle of wine and Lance's favorite chocolate cake, intending to celebrate a debt-free life together. When he returned from work, I laid everything out on the table, remarking, "Finally, it feels like it's been a long time. But the last 20 years have gone by so fast, haven't they, honey?" His trembling and lowered head made me wonder if he was crying from happiness. However, to my shock, he burst into laughter in a way I had never heard before. "What the hell is going on? Are you okay?" My supposed husband declared something outrageous. "You are dismissed now. I'm grateful to you for the past 20 years. Thanks to you paying off all my debt, I'm a free man. Great job. I don't need you anymore." "What are you talking about?" I genuinely had no clue. He pulled out something from his bag. "This is my last present to you." Bold letters of a divorce petition stabbed my eyes. Proudly, he continued, "I've decided to marry someone else, so you are no longer of any use to me. Thanks for being my cash dispenser until now. You're getting remarried? Have you been cheating on me all this time?" I recalled his habitual late returns, citing work or socializing. While I toiled to pay off his debt, he was nowhere to be found. His expression remained smug. "I will never read that unfaithful. I have already found the next potential wife. I want to divorce you and marry her. That's why I have been waiting for you to clear my debt." Tears welled up at the absurdity. The feast I had prepared blurred before my saddened eyes. "Get the hell out of here." He handed me the divorce papers. My blood boiled faster than I could feel sadness or despair. "Okay, but you won't regret it." I forced out my voice. "No, I won't. Why would I regret divorcing an old hag like you?" "Old hag?" If I were her, he would be an old fart. Did he think he was still young? His misconception was so ridiculous that I regained composure and accepted the divorce papers. "I'm going to take this with me for now, and I'll be in touch." I packed my belongings and left the house. How could my 20 years of marriage come to such an easy end? Finally alone, I shed tears of emptiness and frustration. Later, I asked my attorney for a divorce agreement, sending it to Lance. I also requested a background report on his bride-to-be. Shortly after, he called me. "Hey Jessica, what the hell is this document?" He sounded furious. I could imagine his face turning bright red even over the phone. Contrasting his fury, I remained calm. "That is a divorce agreement. What about it?" "I know what it is. What I'm talking about is this loan agreement. Why do I have to pay you back?" He sounded distraught, yelling, "This is crazy. This is not right." Referring to the repayment of the loan between spouses during the marriage, he protested against returning the money I paid on his behalf. "This is ridiculous. You decided to do it out of your goodwill, didn't you? Why are you digging up the past?" "What do you mean? I did it as your wife. If we divorce, that's a different story." Regret hit him. He just realized it. When he asked for a divorce, I immediately thought of making him repay my head. My profession involved dealings with insurance and investments, giving me contacts with experienced attorneys. I consulted them right away. The total, including interest, was a little over $300,000. I was determined to have him pay me back precisely that. That was all I asked for. He grasped the seriousness, seeing the name of a locally famous attorney on the document. "Ludicrously," he said, "you know that I don't have much money. Sell the store to fund it then. If I do that, I won't have anything left. You're only 55. You could still find a job if you wanted to. Give me a break." The conversation made no sense. I wanted to hang up, but there was one last thing to check. How's it going with your new bride-to-be? None of your business. I burst out in laughter. It seemed like he was going through a lot. Good luck. I was about to hang up. Wait a minute. I've decided not to marry her. We can start over. For some reason, he pleaded with me. I yelled my last words and hung up. Start over? Don't kid yourself. I don't want you. I had been married to such a man for 20 years. Did I look more ridiculous than him in the eyes of others? I respected him until the divorce. I had watched him work hard for the store and his customers. 20 years later, I realized he was just a fool. The mentioned remarriage started with innocent flirtation with a part-time university student, Melissa. You are so cute, Melissa. Will you be my wife? She played along, jokingly replying, well, I would think about it if you let me be a full-time housewife. The truth was, he believed she was serious. Marrying a man nearly 40 years her senior seemed like a mere joke to her. It turned horrifying when he persistently pressed her to marry him, leading her parents to intervene and obtain a restraining order against him. Reading the private investigation report, I laughed so hard I hyperventilated. When he came home late, I assumed he was working hard, unaware of the truth. Instead, he was hitting on young girls at bars and strip joints, boasting, I'm surprisingly popular with young girls. I'm a salesman, so I have this easy-to-talk-to aura and get along with them. And I'm told that I look younger. Don't you think so? The girls apparently cringed at his comments. With no use for his older wife and viewing me only as a cash dispenser, his misconceived self-image turned him into a somewhat laughable stalker who almost got in trouble with the police. Perhaps it would have been better if he had cheated on me. Unfortunately, he couldn't even find a mistress. The reason behind his pursuit of a young girl was his friend Matt having a grandchild. Matt recounted, as soon as he saw my grandchild, he said he wanted to have a child himself. I scolded him, saying he shouldn't say such a thing. You had been paying his debt for him. He was absolutely mortified. I'm glad I didn't spend my golden years with that man, I muttered. My divorce finalized, and despite unclear property division, he gave up due to my attorney's reputation. I wondered how such a gutless person had stayed in business. He sold the store to pay me back. Fortunately, just before the sale, his employees abandoned him. Customers frowned at him for giving up a family business. When they learned the reason was to pay his ex-wife, shock spread through the community. He got what he deserved when he demanded a divorce. A true story that sounded like a comedy circulated. Even if he hadn't sold the store, the bad publicity would have affected his business. Selling before bankruptcy was probably a blessing. The money wasn't enough, so he still works part-time to pay me back. Sometimes he messages, "It was all my fault. Can we get back together?" Even after blocking, he calls from different phones. If you contact your ex-wife any further, we'll file a restraining order, warned my attorney. The calls stopped. He is terrified of the attorney. Guess what I do now? I'm a marriage counselor. Turning 50, I joined my friend's matchmaking business. I quit my previous job, helping singles find a match, offering advice on finances, insurance, etc. Couples appreciating frank discussions from the beginning increased our membership. Having been through a lot, I don't want them to make the same mistakes I did. Though my salary is lower, I enjoy helping others be happy every day. I found happiness after getting rid of my ex-husband. Today, I'm a bridge to someone else's happiness. At last, the day arrived when I could escape the constant sight of your face. Those freeloaders, who did nothing but consume without contributing, needed to go. They should be grateful for the charity they've received all this time. Understood. I declared, I won't be coming back. Thank you for everything until now. Swiftly, I gathered my essentials and bid farewell to the place I had called my in-laws' home for many years. As I left, my mother-in-law wore a satisfied expression, relishing my departure. However, only I harbored a certain poignant truth. My name is Sarah. I'm 32 years old and work remotely from home. Married to Alan for 5 years, our marital bliss took a turn in our 4th year when Alan's previously robust father fell ill, necessitating our presence and care. Initially resistant to the idea of living with my in-laws, I acquiesced due to Alan being their sole source of familial support. Despite contemplating quitting my job for his care, my company permitted me to continue working remotely, considering my past performance. The complications with my in-laws began immediately, familiarizing me with the notorious mother-in-law and daughter-in-law dynamic. Sarah, hurry up and tend to the cooking and cleaning. How long will you be lazy, avoiding your household duties? Scolded my mother-in-law. I'm working right now. What are you talking about? I'm always clicking away on the computer, I retorted. The truth was, amidst household chores and caring for my ailing father-in-law, I utilized my skills to regain my pre-crisis salary. After about 3 months of intense effort, when my earnings matched their previous peak, I felt genuine joy. However, the reason for my relentless dedication lay in the financial reality. Alan's income alone couldn't sustain us. Despite my hopes that life would finally ease up, the struggle continued. I contemplated setting aside some savings, but inexplicably, circumstances grew increasingly challenging. It felt as though the funds in my wallet were in a constant state of decline. Intrigued by this, I scrutinized our expenses and discovered that Alan had been indulging in lavish spending. Furthermore, my mother-in-law exhibited a penchant for extravagant habits. Alan, always eager to please others, extended his generosity beyond work lunches, using our credit cards to fund drinking parties. My mother-in-law, juggling numerous hobbies with friends, liberally paid for lessons and social gatherings. Despite their profligate ways, the burden of household chores and caring for my ailing father-in-law fell solely on me. I found myself covering all our living expenses with my income, making the prospect of saving money seem like a distant dream. Anxious about our financial situation, I approached Alan and my mother-in-law. Alan, mother, it seems we've been spending excessively. If this continues, we'll deplete our finances. Could you please consider cutting back on your expenses? I implored. In response, Alan and my mother-in-law harshly dismissed my concerns. I don't want to appear stingy in front of my colleagues and subordinates. Can't you understand that? Argued Alan. They won't think you're stingy just because you don't pay for them every single time, I reasoned. Maintaining good relationships with your coworkers is important, but what about the trips to the girls' bars? That has nothing to do with work, I pointed out. You just want to have fun, don't you? How about you come home drunk and start talking about it, even if no one asks you? That just means you have a more enjoyable time there than spending time with me. I expressed my frustration. My mother-in-law sided with Alan, laughing off my concerns. I'm glad Mom understands, and she's right, Alan asserted. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law justified her spending, stating, if I didn't go to my classes, I'd just be cooped up at home. I'm taking classes with my friends to enjoy the limited time. I found myself grappling with the harsh words echoing in my ears, labeling me as a terrible daughter-in-law. Their judgmental remarks centered on the fact that I dedicated myself to household chores without earning an income, rendering me, in their eyes, without the right to voice complaints. The notion of being looked down upon by a homemaker left me perplexed. In truth, I worked diligently, contributing a steady income to the household while also managing the housework and caring for my father-in-law. Their skepticism and belittling tone, asserting that working from home couldn't yield much, were disheartening. Even more so, my mother-in-law had apparently fed Alan a distorted narrative, implying that she alone took care of my father-in-law, painting me as an idle homemaker. The injustice of their perception left me speechless. Despite the countless moments when I contemplated leaving that challenging environment, the anchor that held me was my deep concern for my father-in-law. Since the early days of my marriage, he had consistently treated me with kindness, in stark contrast to Alan and my mother-in-law. His expressions of gratitude, acknowledging me as a wonderful daughter-in-law, resonated in my heart. Whenever he required care, he would apologize for the burden while expressing gratitude for my efforts. In these moments, I found solace and purpose in caring for him. I couldn't fathom leaving him to the whims of Alan and my mother-in-law. Father-in-law, it seemed, had been keenly aware of the family's dynamics, recognizing my contributions in maintaining our household's financial stability. His words of appreciation, acknowledging the importance of my efforts, became a source of strength. The anxiety about the fate of this household without my presence was overshadowed by the greater concern for my beloved father-in-law. Thus, I made the decision to personally provide dedicated care until my father-in-law's passing a year later. The somber occasion of his funeral became an emotional battleground for me. Despite my heartfelt grief, my tears were met with disapproval. "Why are you crying so much, Sarah? Father-in-law has passed away. Isn't mourning like this natural?" I was asked, but my response seemed to provoke irritation from my mother-in-law. She accused me of making it sound as if she had never taken care of him at all. The truth, however, was starkly different. My mother-in-law had hardly been involved in my father-in-law's care. Her preoccupation with hobbies and frequent outings left me as the primary caregiver. Despite my efforts, she portrayed herself as the oppressed and pitiful mother-in-law to outsiders, painting me as the cruel daughter-in-law. In the eyes of relatives, it seemed as though I was being too harsh on my mother-in-law. Even in the midst of mourning, I found myself criticized by those who understood little of the dynamics. Frustrated, I chose to distance myself from the relatives. However, this move did not go unnoticed by Ellen, who approached me with complaints. "You embarrassed Mom in front of everyone," he accused. "That doesn't make any sense. I was only crying about father-in-law's death. Despite that, your mom told me it was strange for me to cry. I never said she hadn't taken care of Dad at all. I just talked about mourning the loss of my father-in-law, whom I had always cared for," I defended myself. In the escalating argument, Ellen accused me of insulting his mother and suggested that if it bothered me so much, I should have cared for his father myself. The clash intensified, prompting the intervention of relatives who finally put an end to our quarrel. Following that incident, I maintained complete silence with my husband. After the funeral proceedings concluded, a lawyer arrived to discuss the inheritance. The lawyer began, "I'd like to discuss the contents of the will regarding your late father's estate. Firstly, to the wife and daughter-in-law Sarah, he's left half of his cash to each of you. To his son Ellen, he's left ownership of the family land and home." My mother-in-law questioned, "What if Alan gets the land and the house? Doesn't that mean all the other assets go to the wife? Why is Sarah receiving an inheritance? She's not related by blood." The lawyer responded, "Your husband was deeply grateful to Sarah for the dedicated care she gave him. He wanted to express his gratitude by giving her part of the inheritance. This decision cannot be changed." Unable to accept this, my mother-in-law accused, "I can't believe it. You were caring for him just to get the inheritance, weren't you?" I defended myself, explaining, "I had a good relationship with my father-in-law since I got married. I took care of him to express my gratitude." My mother-in-law continued with her accusations, suggesting it was psychological abuse. Frustrated, she eventually gave up, and the lawyer continued, "So that was Dad's decision. It's gratitude for Sarah's caring, right? If that's the case, then we have no choice but to follow it. May I continue?" As the lawyer proceeded, my mother-in-law's discontented expression turned into a smile, and she exclaimed, "Yes, that's great. I understand." Confused, my husband questioned her, "What do you mean?" But my mother-in-law seemed pleased and explained, "Now that Dad's living is over, it's no longer necessary to rely on Sarah. Her inheritance is nothing more than severance pay. We don't need her in this house anymore." My mother-in-law had misunderstood my father-in-law's will, just as he had intended. In truth, he had discussed this plan with me before his passing. He wanted me to be free from the constraints of this house after his demise. Using the will, he cleverly deceived my husband and mother-in-law, making it seem natural for me to leave, just as he had planned. My mother-in-law, misinterpreting my father-in-law's intentions, saw the will as an opportunity to eject me from the family, concealing my actual desire to leave. I responded to her shock by saying, "Father-in-law, why would you treat me like this? Even to Dad, I was just someone taking care of him. Ellen, you can't understand Sarah anymore, right? Why don't you just divorce her?" Looking at Alan with tearful eyes, I pleaded, and after contemplating for a moment, he agreed. "You know what? Let's get a divorce. I've inherited the family home and land, and Mom got some money too. There's no longer any need to worry about living, so there's no problem if Sarah goes." "What do you mean by that?" "Just what I said. I feel bad for asking, but could you leave our house and agree to the divorce?" Understanding that there was no place for me there anymore, I agreed. "Understood. I guess there's no place for me here anymore." With a hint of restraint, I retrieved a document from the drawer and handed it to my husband. It was a notice of filing for divorce, prepared after our previous argument. My husband promptly signed it, expressing, "Finally, I don't have to deal with you anymore. A non-working freeloader should just get out. You should be grateful for us having put up with you, a total freeloader. Is that so?" "Okay, I understand. I'll leave. Thank you for things up to now." As I left, my mother-in-law appeared elated, unaware of what would transpire in the future of their house. Once out of their home, I wasted no time and immediately submitted the divorce notice to the city hall. Arriving at the apartment I had rented in advance, the spacious room echoed with my joy as I exclaimed, "Finally, I can be by myself. This is great." I felt overwhelmed with joy to be liberated from a challenging marriage. My heartfelt gratitude extended to my father-in-law for devising the plan that enabled my escape from my in-laws' home. Subsequently, I embraced a comfortable life living on my own, appreciating the newfound freedom and the ability to continue working remotely, a skill I had cultivated during my time at my in-laws' place. Having honed my time management skills, work flowed smoothly and my income increased, allowing me to lead a comfortable life free from interference. However, my peaceful existence took an unexpected turn when my ex-husband, Alan, called me out of the blue. Perplexed, I questioned, "It's been a while. Why are you calling me? Weren't you the one telling me to disappear?" "Sarah, please help us. We're in a pinch," Alan pleaded. I chuckled, finding the situation ironic. "What kind of joke is this? My salary hasn't changed, but for some reason, you're running out of money. We can't live like this." With a laugh, I decided to deliver the final blow. "That's because you no longer have my income to support you. You squandered your entire salary on yourself. Maybe it's about time you and your mother learned some financial responsibility as adults." Confused, Alan asked, "What do you mean? You still don't get it?" I clarified. "While you were living lavishly, my salary was the one paying for our living expenses. At that time, I was making about $4,800 a month. Now I'm earning even more than that with no one to get in my way." Expressing frustration, Alan pleaded, "Sarah, can't we start over? It was a mistake to let you go. I want to make things right again." I scoffed. "It's obvious you're after my income. Don't be ridiculous. I never want to see your face again. What happened to the inheritance your mother received? With that amount, she should be living comfortably." Alan confessed, "It's about to run out. We spend it on a shopping spree, overseas trips, and half of it disappeared in the casino." Unmoved, I retorted, "A foolish mother breeds a foolish son. I have nothing more to say to you. I'm a stranger now, and I can't do anything for you, nor do I want to." Desperate, Alan implored, "Don't be so heartless. Help me. This has nothing to do with me. There's nothing more to talk about. I'm hanging up. Don't call me again," I declared before ending the call and promptly canceling the contract for the mobile phone I was using. A year later, passing by my mother-in-law's house, I discovered it had become an empty lot, likely sold due to financial struggles. Unperturbed, I continued with my newfound spare time, attending a wine class I had long been interested in. There, I met a man 2 years my senior who took me seriously. After a year and a half of dating, we got married. He is the ace of a well-known company, humble despite his high salary, with a warm and wonderful character. We respect each other's careers, leading to a fulfilling married life. Reflecting on these changes, I can't help but feel that this retribution was, in a way, a gift from my father-in-law. Hey everyone, I'm Claire, and I want to share a chapter of my life that revolves around challenging relationships with my in-laws and husband. Currently navigating the complexities of a divorce, I thought it might resonate with those of you who've experienced unwarranted criticism from your in-laws. Let me take you back to how it all began. I met Zane, my now estranged husband, on a dating site when I was a 19-year-old college student. Zane, at 25, had a stable job. Despite the age gap, love blossomed between us. I've never been one to judge based on age or appearance, so Zane's age was never a concern for me. However, Zane struggled with our age difference. He often questioned, "Why are you with me, Claire? I don't understand. I'm so much older than you. You could find someone your own age who's better suited for you." Yes, I could, but I don't want to. I fell in love with you, and age doesn't matter to me. Zane, burdened by insecurities, persisted. "There must be other reasons, Claire. It's not natural for someone like you to love someone like me. I wish you'd tell me the truth." "I am telling you the truth. I don't want to date boys my age. I love you, and that's all that matters to me." Despite my assurances, Zane struggled to believe me, revealing deep-seated self-esteem issues that may have contributed to his single status. Determined to prove the authenticity of my feelings, I embarked on a journey to demonstrate the depth of my love for him. Throughout our entire relationship, I refrained from letting Zane spend money on me. While I wasn't a broke college student, I wasn't rolling in wealth either. Despite my financial constraints, I made sure to buy him gifts and cover my own expenses each time. I held a modest job, so I wasn't destitute. Zane seemed to appreciate these gestures. Regrettably, Zane's low self-esteem persisted, and he continued to doubt the authenticity of my love. Despite my best efforts to be supportive and understanding, his mistrust shattered my heart. It wasn't until the first 2 years had passed that I discovered the root of Zane's self-esteem issues. Meeting his parents, Michael and Molly, shed light on his struggles. Michael, Zane's father, had experienced a stroke of luck, winning the lottery and dramatically improving their lives. They purchased an extravagant house and secured their future with the remaining funds. However, Michael and Molly carried an air of superiority. During our initial encounter, Michael boasted, "Not everyone can make it big like me. I was a hard-working man, and look where it got me. Do you know how uncommon it is to win a huge lottery? The chances are very low, but I did it on the first try." They took pride in their decision-making skills, insinuating that Zane, despite completing college, would never match their financial success. Molly hinted that Zane's previous partners were gold diggers, leaving as soon as their financial situation improved. The couple openly questioned Zane's ability to make sound choices. This attitude infuriated me. Zane's parents indirectly accused every girl he dated of being interested only in his money. Over time, Zane internalized these beliefs, contributing to his insecurities. The insinuation that I, too, was a gold digger became a humiliating part of the narrative. Fed up with the unjust assumptions, I decided to defend both Zane and myself. I declared, "I'm sorry, but I have to disagree with you. Zane has worked hard to establish himself in his career, and with time, he will achieve even greater success." Michael rebutted, "Well, that doesn't change the fact that women only want him for money. The money we have is ours, but Zane does co-own the house. Ultimately, it will be his when we pass. Let me tell you, every time they see our $200,000 house, I swear these girls see dollar signs in their eyes. I can't vouch for Zane's past relationships, but I'm certainly not in this for the money. I love your son, and that's the reason we're together. I have no interest in your house. Don't worry, Claire. Sometimes it's challenging to accept that people can be successful and live in nice houses. You live in a small rented apartment with roommates. After spending time around our house, you might start desiring it too. It's just a matter of time. Michael and Molly's comments were pushing my anger to the brink. I was on the verge of exploding. Zane heard it all but chose not to respond or defend himself, steering the conversation in a different direction. His nonchalant attitude surprised me. On our way home, I decided to address it with him. Zane, your parents are being unkind. They're insulting both of us. Why didn't you speak up? What did you expect me to say, Claire? I can't be certain they're entirely wrong. Women in the past have used me to try and benefit from my parents' wealth. They made grand plans involving the house and how it would be ours once my parents passed away. Even if they were gold diggers, that doesn't mean I am one too. You stayed silent when your family insulted me as well. You know my family is well off now. There's a chance they're right about everything. I'm not saying you had bad intentions, but I can understand why it might seem questionable. You don't have parents, so you rely on my inheritance alone. What you're suggesting is absurd, Zane. I've never pressured you to spend money on me. And just because I don't have an inheritance doesn't give you the right to label me a gold digger. Zane remained unwilling to acknowledge my concerns, insisting that he loved me, and the reasons behind it didn't matter. He shrugged off the need for further discussion. While some might have found solace in such assurances, I couldn't accept the thought of him harboring negative beliefs about me. I attempted numerous conversations, hoping to make him understand my perspective. I even suggested therapy, recognizing its potential benefits for him. However, he adamantly claimed there was nothing wrong, causing me to eventually abandon the effort. As time passed, I distanced myself from his family. We became engaged shortly after my college graduation, and although my job paid decently, I started saving to contribute to our wedding expenses. We split the costs evenly and got married when I was 22. However, the subsequent 3 years turned into a tumultuous period of my life. Zane frequently visited his parents, returning home in a sour mood each time. I knew Michael and Molly were still taunting him and branding me as a gold digger. Despite my pleas for Zane to limit contact with them, he continued to engage with his parents. Their words poisoned his perception of our relationship, convincing him that no one could genuinely love him. Even after years of love and care, Zane remained suspicious of me. The burden of constantly proving myself became increasingly draining. However, the breaking point arrived on Zane's birthday. In line with his preference for small celebrations, we had a quiet cake party at home. I presented him with the expensive watch he had desired. Zane was elated with the gift, but my joy waned when he suggested visiting his parents to showcase it. Despite my reluctance, I accompanied him at his insistence. Upon reaching their house, Zane eagerly displayed the watch to Molly and Michael. "Mom, Dad, look at this beautiful watch Claire gave me. I've been wanting it for a while now. Isn't it gorgeous?" "Oh, did she know, Zane? It seems she does love you after all. We were quite concerned for a while there." "Don't get carried away, Michael. She's a gold digger. She married our son because we own a $200,000 house. Let's not forget the facts." "Yeah, you're right. I almost forgot that the house is the only reason Claire married Zane." "Excuse me? Why do you think I married your son for your house?" "Well, you were just living in an apartment after working for 4 years. Besides, Zane is so much older than you. Why would you marry him unless you want something from him? I'm sure our house was always an attraction, if not his money. I married your son because I love him. All your theories about my gold-digging intentions are wrong. Zane knows the truth, and he will tell you that, won't you, Zane?" To my complete surprise, Zane remained silent. I was already feeling uncomfortable with my in-laws' belief that I was a gold digger. But Zayn's reaction, or lack thereof, shocked me. He kept his head down and avoided eye contact with me. Feeling perplexed, I decided to push him a bit. I couldn't fathom why he wasn't standing up for me. "Why are you not saying anything? Your parents always thought I was a gold digger. How will they know the real me if you don't tell them? Why are you quiet? Tell them they're wrong." I don't know what you want me to say, Claire. I don't know if my parents are off the mark. There might be a possibility that you're after this house. Are you serious right now, Zayn? You believe I married you for your assets? He's not wrong to think like that. It's suspicious that you've never considered buying a house. You haven't even discussed it with him. For someone renting a place, owning a house should have been a priority. Yeah, it should be a priority, but you've chosen not to work toward owning a house. Our place is expensive, and you can't afford something like this even if you tried. So you decided to marry Zayn and settle here. That makes more sense to me. I mean, why would you marry me, Claire? You might have feelings for me, but I think there's more to it than just love. I found myself speechless after this exchange. All the love I had for Zayn seemed to have been reduced to nothing. At the end of the day, my in-laws and even my husband viewed me as a gold digger. While my in-laws' reaction bothered me, it was Zayn's response that devastated me. In that moment, I made a decision. I wanted a divorce. I didn't immediately disclose my decision to them. I waited for the right time. So when Zayn and I returned to our place, I contacted a lawyer and initiated the divorce process. The lawyer assured me that the papers would be ready within a week. In the meantime, I opted to stay in a separate room. Zayn assumed I was just letting off steam and had no idea of what was coming. When the divorce papers finally arrived at my parents' house, I packed my bags and left. When Zayn called me in a panic, I instructed him to come to an address and bring my in-laws along. Despite his confusion, he agreed. Upon their arrival, I was waiting on the porch. They looked taken aback by the house. I said, "You must be wondering why I brought you here. It's a beautiful house, isn't it? No one can compare their house to this. It costs around $2 million in today's market. Pretty expensive, but worth the money. There's also furniture with an added value of millions. What is this place, Claire? I don't know why you have access to such a house. Why don't you guys come in so that we can talk? I can't tell you everything on my porch." "What do you mean by your porch?" I brushed off their astonishment and walked inside. They trailed behind, even more impressed by the opulence within. The owners of the house had spared no expense. As we settled down, I took a deep breath and addressed them. "I've reached a decision, and that's why you're here. I filed for divorce. Here are the papers. We can proceed with an uncontested divorce if you agree." "What? I don't understand. Why are you filing for divorce?" Zayn's voice held a mixture of confusion and concern. "Because you and your parents believe I'm a gold digger. You think I'm after your house, right? Despite my assurances, you refuse to listen. So I'll spare you from my gold-digging self and divorce Zayn. It seems that's what everyone wants. You're considering divorce just because my parents told the truth. That's ridiculous. We didn't say anything untrue. Why the dramatics?" Zayn's tone betrayed his disbelief. "I think this is for the best, Zayn. If she's adamant, you should sign the papers. At least then you'll find someone who truly loves you." His mother interjected, her expression unreadable. "Why did you bring us to this house? Do you expect me to buy this for you as part of our divorce settlement?" Zayn's voice carried a tinge of accusation. "Why would I need you to buy this house, Zayn? This house is already mine," I replied calmly. The shock and disbelief etched on their faces hit me like a bomb. They regarded me with disbelief, as if I were joking. Zayn and his family seemed utterly unconvinced. "How on earth can you afford a house like this? You're renting, and your job isn't enough to cover this. Stop lying to us," Zayn's father demanded, his tone sharp with suspicion. "I'm not lying, Zayn. Remember when I mentioned that my parents left me some inheritance? Well, this is the house I was talking about. It's under a trust now, but I'll officially inherit it when I turn 30. I don't work a high-paying job because I have a trust fund waiting for me. That's impossible. Your parents passed away a long time ago. They should have let you have the house earlier. Well, you see, my parents were aware of the potential leeches I might attract. So they instructed me never to disclose the house or trust fund to anyone. Call it foresight. But they knew someone could exploit me. Hence, they placed everything in a trust to keep it safe until I reached 30. By then, I'd hopefully be settled with someone who genuinely cared about me, not my inheritance. Oh my God, Claire. You should have told us about your wealth. We had no idea. This is a sizable house you have. We could all live very comfortably here. Yeah, you should have shared that sooner. We thought you were after our house. We could have avoided all the misunderstandings. I'd always knew Claire was perfect for Zane. I've been saying she's a great woman. Look how wealthy she is. Zane really found a great match. Hearing this, I couldn't help but laugh. Their attitude toward me had shifted so rapidly that it made my head spin. What was even more bizarre was that they soon seemed to forget about the divorce filing. I took out the divorce papers and signed them. As I was saying, here's my signature for an uncontested divorce. You can just sign these to make it easy if you want to fight. We can take this to court. I won't live with you anymore. Claire, listen to me. There's no need to rush this. You've already proven you're not a gold digger. There's no reason to get a divorce anymore. We'll even apologize for any misunderstanding. That should make things better, right? Yes, Michael is right. We are sorry, Claire. We doubted you for no reason. I don't want your insincere apologies, Zane. For 2 years, you allowed your family to berate me and label me a gold digger. I expected you to at least defend me. But no, you sided with them and accused me of being a gold digger as well. I won't stay with someone who doesn't respect his wife. I'm done with you. We can part ways amicably or involve the courts. The choice is yours. Zane, Molly, and Michael tried their best to change my decision, pleading with me to let go of the past. In their minds, what happened was just a simple misunderstanding. Not once did they show remorse for tarnishing my name. Their audacity fueled my anger. When I reached my breaking point, I demanded they leave before I called the police. My anger intimidated them, and they left. Over the next few weeks, Zane and my in-laws continued to harass me daily. They begged, pleaded, and even offered bribes to convince me to stay. Their belief that I could be swayed with money only intensified my fury. It revealed that they still considered me motivated by financial gain. The irony was that, as Zane co-owned the house with his parents, I was entitled to half of his share. This realization fueled their desperation for reconciliation. Despite their attempts, I remained steadfast in my decision to part ways. I relocated all my belongings to my parents' house, asserting my right to stay there even before officially taking ownership. Zane and the in-laws persisted in reaching out, prompting me to change my number entirely. I wanted to avoid their constant attempts to contact me from unfamiliar numbers. Zane attempted to discuss matters at my workplace, but security was informed and asked him to leave. Zane still hadn't signed the divorce papers, holding out hope for a change in my decision. Nearly a year has passed since I initiated the divorce proceedings. With only a year or less remaining before the legal process concludes, I've managed quite well on my own. Living independently, I've found happiness and financial stability. While I've gone on dates, I'm not considering anything serious at the moment. According to a cousin of Zane's, they are apprehensive about paying me my entitled share of the house. Legal fees are piling up, and their savings are insufficient. Zane is even pushing for a sale, harboring resentment toward his parents for the upheaval in his life. At this point, I simply don't care and only want to be free from that toxic family.
Hello everyone, my name is Lisa. I'm 29 years old and currently living in Atlanta, Georgia. though I'm planning to move soon. Recently, I ended a difficult year-and-a-half-long marriage. It was a challenging time, but with my father's support and the intervention of the police, I managed to get through it. Looking back, I realize I should have been more cautious before accepting the proposal. I've always been shy and reserved, finding comfort in solitude. Most of my time is spent on my computer, immersed in the digital world. Occasionally, I'll visit a pub for a drink, but I'm uneasy around strangers and hesitant to form new friendships out of concern for my safety. My life changed significantly when I was 7. My mother passed away from an untreated heart condition, and from that moment on, my father, a mariner since his mid-20s, raised me. His job kept him away for long stretches, but he always stayed in touch through calls and letters. When my mother died, he returned home to comfort me. I still remember clinging to him at her funeral as he reassured me, "It's okay now, my little girl, Daddy's here." That night, I saw him cry on the couch, whispering to himself before burying his face in a cushion. It was only the second time I'd seen him cry. The first was when I was injured as a child, feeling responsible for our situation. He took 3 months off from sailing to care for me. Before his next voyage, he left me in my grandmother's care, encouraging me to help her and promising to return soon. Those early years of loss and resilience shaped me. I spent most of my time indoors, helping my grandmother and finding solace in books and, later, the internet. By the time I started college, my father sent me back to our old house. Adjusting was hard. I disliked campus life and struggled to connect with others in person, but online, I found confidence. The internet became my refuge, a place where I could express myself freely. I made friends from around the world, each with unique stories that showed me how interconnected we all are. It was here I met Steven, a content creator. We started chatting and eventually progressed to video calls. To keep my anonymity, I wore a Batman mask, and he covered his face with a scarf and beanie. "Hi Lisa, it's great to finally see you," Steven greeted during one of our calls. "Hello Steven, nice to meet you, virtually," I replied. "How are you feeling today? Have you chatted with many people?" he asked. "I'm okay, just a bit nervous," I admitted. "That's normal, don't worry, I'm just as awkward as you," he reassured me with a smile. As we talked, we discovered shared interests and exchanged stories. The connection felt natural, and I began to feel at ease. "Thanks for making this so effortless," I said. "The feeling's mutual. Lisa, you're great to talk to. Let's chat again sometime. I'm usually online playing Mario," he joked. Our conversations deepened over time, and though we only knew each other online, we formed a meaningful bond. Meanwhile, my father remained cautious about my online activities. Over dinner recently, he asked about my plans. "So, how are your studies, Dove?" he asked. "I've graduated, Dad," I replied, a hint of sharpness in my voice. "You wouldn't know, you weren't there." He sighed, looking regretful. "Oh, Lisa, I'm sorry, I know I missed a lot. I even emailed you saying I'd be there for your birthday." "Tomorrow's my pumpkin's birthday," he exclaimed, trying to lighten the mood. "Stop calling me names, Dad, I'm not a kid anymore. To me, you'll always be my little dove. But seriously, what are your plans? Are you thinking of working?" "I'm not sure yet," I admitted. "What do you mean you're not sure? What are your friends up to these days?" His questions made me reflect on where my life is heading. While I'm uncertain about the future, I know that both the digital and real-world experiences have shaped me. For now, I'll take one step at a time, guided by the lessons I've learned along the way. "I don't have any friends, Dad," I finally admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. My dad sighed deeply. "Lisa, I didn't send you to live with your mom's family just so you could stay cooped up inside all day. There's a whole world out there, so many people you'll never meet if you don't step outside." "That's the problem," I said, exasperated. "I don't know how to." This exchange exposed the gulf between us, his world of tangible connections and mine, rooted in the digital realm. Still, I relented. "I'll try, okay? I do have friends, but they're all online." "Online friends?" Dad shook his head, disappointment creeping into his voice. "That's not how real friendships work, Lisa." I sighed, the weight of his disapproval pressing down on me. "Fine, how about this, we go out today, just you and me, shopping or something?" "That sounds like a start," he said, his tone softening. "You've got to push yourself, Lisa, this isn't living. I know it's been hard since Janice." "Why are you bringing Mom into this?" I snapped, anger bubbling to the surface. "What are you trying to say?" "I'm saying we've both been stuck in the past," he said gently, Though his words stung, we loved her, but we have to find a way forward, Lisa. His well-meaning words ignited something in me. I slammed my hands on the table, the clatter echoing in the room. You don't understand me, I spat, standing abruptly. Lisa, please, I'm trying to help you, Dad pleaded, his voice tinged with frustration and hurt. You don't know everything about me, so stop pretending you do, I shouted before storming off, my emotions in turmoil. I retreated to my sanctuary, my room, my computer, and the reassuring presence of Stephen on the other end of the screen. Stephen, you won't believe the argument I just had with my dad, I vented. Tell me what happened, he replied, his voice calm and understanding. I poured out my frustrations, the sense of being misunderstood, my dad's inability to grasp why I found solace online. Stephen listened patiently, never judging. Hey, he said after a moment, would you want to meet up sometime? We're both introverts, so it doesn't have to be anything big, just a quiet place where we can talk. His suggestion startled me. I'm not sure, it feels so sudden, I'd need time to think about it, I said, my voice hesitant. Take all the time you need, Stephen replied warmly, whenever you're ready, you know where to find me, here's my address. Why are you so kind to me? We're just strangers, I asked, confused by his unwavering support. Because I like you, Lisa, he admitted simply. You, like me? My voice wavered with disbelief. Yeah, he said softly, I'd like to get to know you better, and if you ever feel the same, I'm here. Meeting Stephen felt like a leap into the unknown, but one I knew I needed to take. Standing outside his house for the first time, my heart raced with a mix of excitement and apprehension. After a month of chatting online, I was about to step beyond the screen into a new chapter of my life. I was about to meet Stephen in person for the first time. Surprisingly, he lived just a 15-minute drive away. Taking a deep breath to calm my nerves, I knocked on the weathered wooden door. It creaked open, revealing Stephen's warm smile, which immediately put me at ease. Welcome to my humble abode, your presence graces my domain, fair master, he joked, adding a playful touch of gamer lingo. I laughed softly, some of that gaming talk might go over my head, but thank you, this place is cozy. Do you live here alone? I asked, glancing around at the neatly arranged space. Nope, fair princess, he replied with a grin. I live with my mom, she has the ground floor, and I've got the top floor all to myself. Come on, I'll give you the grand tour. Stephen's home wasn't extravagant, but it was charming and full of personality. Shelves lined with well-thumbed classics, a stack of board games, and a perfectly arranged computer setup painted a picture of someone genuine and thoughtful. His quirks, evident in every corner, made the space feel uniquely his. We spent the afternoon talking and laughing, discovering shared interests that deepened our connection beyond the digital realm. Meeting in person added a layer of closeness I hadn't anticipated. He was as kind and witty as he'd been online, and his easy humor made me feel at ease. As the sun began to set, Stephen suggested a walk in the nearby park. The cool breeze accompanied our conversation, which flowed seamlessly, dissolving any lingering nervousness. Wait, you didn't celebrate your birthday? He asked, surprised, during a lull in our talk. No, I admitted quietly, I didn't feel like it, especially after the argument with my dad. Stephen gave me a sympathetic look. I'm sorry to hear that. I'm sure he'll come around, he's your dad, after all. At first, his words seemed kind, soothing even, but over time, I realized there was an edge to his concern. What began as a blossoming relationship turned into something suffocating. As we started dating, Stephen's affection grew possessive. He wanted me constantly available, either talking to him on the phone or online. If I chatted with anyone else, he'd get angry, cloaking his jealousy with statements like, I just want to protect you. I believed him. Why did I believe him? His mother's disapproval only made things worse. Though she'd never met me, she dismissed me outright. The strain of knowing she didn't approve was compounded by Stephen's constant defense of her. Not every parent is perfect. Just look at your dad, he'd say. At least my mom cares about me. That hurts, Stephen, I'd reply, trying to make him see the damage his words caused. But you know I'm the one who loves you, right? Your dad doesn't love you like I do. Stop complaining about your life and try to compromise, he'd add, his tone more commanding than caring. When he suggested a secret wedding, I was too worn down to resist. Stephen convinced me that my dad wouldn't approve and didn't truly care about me. Blinded by what I thought was love, I went along with it, believing his assurances over my own instincts. Looking back, I wonder how I let it get so far. Each step I took closer to Stephen, I seemed to lose more of myself. I reluctantly agreed to marry him in a quiet, somber ceremony. Deep down, I knew it was a risk, but I felt trapped by my circumstances. You might think I was weak, but the weight of my upbringing and insecurities had shaped me, leaving me unsure of how to stand up for myself. I often blamed my inability to fight back on my own failings. In the months that followed, I began to see a side of his mother I hadn't anticipated, a side filled with cruelty and malice. Her every action seemed designed to make me miserable. It started with subtle, cutting remarks and escalated into relentless emotional torment. "Is this supposed to be food? My son can't eat this mess. Make it again, you fool," she'd sneer. "Why is this place so filthy? Are you blind?" Her harsh words chipped away at my self-esteem until I felt utterly worthless. Stephen, meanwhile, was a passive observer, locked away in his room with his video games and music. His detachment left me isolated, bearing the brunt of his mother's venom alone. I missed my dad terribly and regretted every fight we'd ever had. It was my anger that had driven him away, and now I had no one to turn to. One day, feeling feverish, I lay down on the couch, hoping for a brief reprieve. Just as I was beginning to drift off, a sudden splash of icy water shocked me awake. Margaret stood over me, her face twisted with disdain. "What the hell are you doing on our couch? Did you get the groceries like I told you?" she barked. Too weak to argue, I didn't reply. "I see, you expect me to do all the work while you laze around? You devil," she spat, slapping me hard across the face before calling for Stephen. That was my breaking point. "I'm done," I shouted. "I won't be your punching bag anymore. Find someone else to torment because I'm leaving." But as I turned to go, something heavy struck the back of my head, and the world went dark. When I came to, I found myself in a dimly lit room. My head throbbed as I struggled to sit up. Where was I? The sound of approaching footsteps sent a chill down my spine. Crawling toward the noise, I reached a metal door with a small window. It creaked open, and there was Stephen, grinning cruelly. "Is my wife afraid of the dark?" he mocked. "Stephen, please let me out. This isn't funny," I begged, tears streaming down my face. "Shut up. This is what you get for disrespecting my mother. Maybe you'll learn to behave down here," he sneered. Desperation consumed me as he slammed the window shut, plunging me into darkness. Alone in the cold, I felt fear give way to anger. How had my life come to this? I reached into my pocket and felt the shattered remains of my phone. To my astonishment, the screen still flickered faintly. Trembling, I dialed the only person who might still care, my father. 3 agonizing days later, hope arrived in the form of a car pulling into the driveway. My heart raced as I heard firm footsteps approach the house. The door burst open, and there he was, my father. His presence was a beacon of strength and relief. He didn't come alone. The police followed him, storming into the house to confront Stephen and Margaret. Their protests were feeble, their lies transparent. "What have you done to my daughter, you monsters?" my father bellowed. "I was going to let her go, I swear," Stephen stammered, but his words fell on deaf ears. My father turned to him, his voice filled with disgust. "You're nothing but a coward. You will pay for what you've done." As I stepped out of that dark basement and into the sunlight, I felt a surge of determination. This ordeal had tested me, but it also revealed my strength and the power of unwavering love. I decided to leave Georgia and start anew in California with my dad. I vowed never to let anyone silence me again and to be more cautious in trusting others. The scars of this experience would remain, but they would serve as a reminder of my resilience and the promise of a brighter future ahead. Hello everyone, my name is Lisa. I'm 29 years old and currently living in Atlanta, Georgia, though I'm planning to move soon. Recently, I ended a difficult 1.5-year-long marriage. It was a challenging time, but with my father's support and the intervention of the police, I managed to get through it. Looking back, I realize I should have been more cautious before accepting the proposal. I've always been shy and reserved, finding comfort in solitude. Most of my time is spent on my computer, immersed in the digital world. Occasionally, I'll visit a pub for a drink, but I'm uneasy around strangers and hesitant to form new friendships out of concern for my safety. My life changed significantly when I was 7. My mother passed away from an untreated heart condition, and from that moment on, my father, a mariner since his mid-20s, raised me. His job kept him away for long stretches, but he always stayed in touch through calls and letters. When my mother died, he returned home to comfort me. I still remember clinging to him at her funeral as he reassured me, "It's okay now, my little girl, Daddy's here." That night, I saw him cry on the couch, whispering to himself before burying his face in a cushion. It was only the second time I'd seen him cry. The first was when I was injured as a child, feeling responsible for our situation. He took 3 months off from sailing to care for me. Before his next voyage, he left me in my grandmother's care, encouraging me to help her and promising to return soon. Those early years of loss and resilience shaped me. I spent most of my time indoors, helping my grandmother and finding solace in books and, later, the internet. By the time I started college, my father sent me back to our old house. Adjusting was hard. I disliked campus life and struggled to connect with others in person, but online, I found confidence. The internet became my refuge, a place where I could express myself freely. I made friends from around the world, each with unique stories that showed me how interconnected we all are. It was here I met Steven, a content creator. We started chatting and eventually progressed to video calls. To keep my anonymity, I wore a Batman mask, and he covered his face with a scarf and beanie. "Hi Lisa, it's great to finally see you," Steven greeted during one of our calls. "Hello Steven, nice to meet you, virtually," I replied. "How are you feeling today? Have you chatted with many people?" he asked. "I'm okay, just a bit nervous," I admitted. "That's normal, don't worry, I'm just as awkward as you," he reassured me with a smile. As we talked, we discovered shared interests and exchanged stories. The connection felt natural, and I began to feel at ease. "Thanks for making this so effortless," I said. "The feeling's mutual. Lisa, you're great to talk to. Let's chat again sometime. I'm usually online playing Mario," he joked. Our conversations deepened over time, and though we only knew each other online, we formed a meaningful bond. Meanwhile, my father remained cautious about my online activities. Over dinner recently, he asked about my plans. "So, how are your studies, Dove?" he asked. "I've graduated, Dad," I replied, a hint of sharpness in my voice. "You wouldn't know, you weren't there." He sighed, looking regretful. "Oh, Lisa, I'm sorry, I know I missed a lot. I even emailed you saying I'd be there for your birthday." "Tomorrow's my pumpkin's birthday," he exclaimed, trying to lighten the mood. "Stop calling me names, Dad, I'm not a kid anymore. To me, you'll always be my little dove. But seriously, what are your plans? Are you thinking of working?" "I'm not sure yet," I admitted. "What do you mean you're not sure? What are your friends up to these days?" His questions made me reflect on where my life is heading. While I'm uncertain about the future, I know that both the digital and real-world experiences have shaped me. For now, I'll take one step at a time, guided by the lessons I've learned along the way. "I don't have any friends, Dad," I finally admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. My dad sighed deeply. "Lisa, I didn't send you to live with your mom's family just so you could stay cooped up inside all day. There's a whole world out there. So many people you'll never meet if you don't step outside." "That's the problem," I said, exasperated. "I don't know how to." This exchange exposed the gulf between us, his world of tangible connections and mine, rooted in the digital realm. Still, I relented. "I'll try, okay? I do have friends, but they're all online." "Online friends?" Dad shook his head, disappointment creeping into his voice. "That's not how real friendships work, Lisa." I sighed, the weight of his disapproval pressing down on me. "Fine, how about this, we go out today, just you and me, shopping or something?" "That sounds like a start," he said, his tone softening. "You've got to push yourself. Lisa, this isn't living. I know it's been hard since Janice." "Why are you bringing Mom into this?" I snapped, anger bubbling to the surface. "What are you trying to say?" "I'm saying we've both been stuck in the past," he said gently, though his words stung. "We loved her, but we have to find a way forward, Lisa." His well-meaning words ignited something in me. I slammed my hands on the table, the clatter echoing in the room. "You don't understand me," I spat, standing abruptly. "Lisa, please, I'm trying to help you," Dad pleaded, his voice tinged with frustration and hurt. "You don't know everything about me, so stop pretending you do," I shouted before storming off, my emotions in turmoil. I retreated to my sanctuary, my room, my computer, and the reassuring presence of Steven on the other end of the screen. "Steven, you won't believe the argument I just had with my dad," I vented. "Tell me what happened," he replied, his voice calm and understanding. I poured out my frustrations, the sense of being misunderstood, my dad's inability to grasp why I found solace online. Steven listened patiently, never judging. "Hey," he said after a moment, "would you want to meet up sometime? We're both introverts, so it doesn't have to be anything big, just a quiet place where we can talk." His suggestion startled me. "I'm not sure, it feels so sudden, I'd need time to think about it," I said, my voice hesitant. "Take all the time you need," Steven replied warmly. "Whenever you're ready, you know where to find me. Here's my address." "Why are you so kind to me? We're just strangers," I asked, confused by his unwavering support. "Because I like you, Lisa," he admitted simply. "You, like me?" My voice wavered with disbelief. "Yeah," he said softly, "I'd like to get to know you better, and if you ever feel the same, I'm here." Meeting Steven felt like a leap into the unknown, but one I knew I needed to take. Standing outside his house for the first time, my heart raced with a mix of excitement and apprehension. After a month of chatting online, I was about to step beyond the screen into a new chapter of my life. I was about to meet Steven in person for the first time. Surprisingly, he lived just a 15-minute drive away. Taking a deep breath to calm my nerves, I knocked on the weathered wooden door. It creaked open, revealing Steven's warm smile, which immediately put me at ease. "Welcome to my humble abode, your presence graces my domain, fair master," he joked, adding a playful touch of gamer lingo. I laughed softly. Some of that gaming talk might go over my head, but thank you. "This place is cozy. Do you live here alone?" I asked, glancing around at the neatly arranged space. "Nope, fair princess," he replied with a grin. "I live with my mom. She has the ground floor, and I've got the top floor all to myself. Come on, I'll give you the grand tour." Steven's home wasn't extravagant, but it was charming and full of personality. Shelves lined with well-thumbed classics, a stack of board games, and a perfectly arranged computer setup painted a picture of someone genuine and thoughtful. His quirks, evident in every corner, made the space feel uniquely his. We spent the afternoon talking and laughing, discovering shared interests that deepened our connection beyond the digital realm. Meeting in person added a layer of closeness I hadn't anticipated. He was as kind and witty as he'd been online, and his easy humor made me feel at ease. As the sun began to set, Steven suggested a walk in the nearby park. The cool breeze accompanied our conversation, which flowed seamlessly, dissolving any lingering nervousness. "Wait, you didn't celebrate your birthday?" he asked, surprised, during a lull in our talk. "No," I admitted quietly, "I didn't feel like it, especially after the argument with my dad." Steven gave me a sympathetic look. "I'm sorry to hear that. I'm sure he'll come around, he's your dad, after all." At first, his words seemed kind, soothing even, but over time, I realized there was an edge to his concern. What began as a blossoming relationship turned into something suffocating. As we started dating, Steven's affection grew possessive. He wanted me constantly available, either talking to him on the phone or online. If I chatted with anyone else, he'd get angry, cloaking his jealousy with statements like, "I just want to protect you." I believed him. Why did I believe him? His mother's disapproval only made things worse. Though she'd never met me, she dismissed me outright. The strain of knowing she didn't approve was compounded by Steven's constant defense of her. "Not every parent is perfect. Just look at your dad," he'd say. "At least my mom cares about me." "That hurts, Steven," I'd reply, trying to make him see the damage his words caused. "But you know I'm the one who loves you, right? Your dad doesn't love you like I do. Stop complaining about your life and try to compromise," he'd add, his tone more commanding than caring. When he suggested a secret wedding, I was too worn down to resist. Steven convinced me that my dad wouldn't approve and didn't truly care about me. Blinded by what I thought was love, I went along with it, believing his assurances over my own instincts. Looking back, I wonder how I let it get so far. Each step I took closer to Steven, I seemed to lose more of myself. I reluctantly agreed to marry him in a quiet, somber ceremony. Deep down, I knew it was a risk, but I felt trapped by my circumstances. You might think I was weak, but the weight of my upbringing and insecurities had shaped me, leaving me unsure of how to stand up for myself. I often blamed my inability to fight back on my own failings. In the months that followed, I began to see a side of his mother I hadn't anticipated, a side filled with cruelty and malice. Her every action seemed designed to make me miserable. It started with subtle, cutting remarks and escalated into relentless emotional torment. "Is this supposed to be food? My son can't eat this mess. Make it again, you fool," she'd sneer. "Why is this place so filthy? Are you blind?" Her harsh words chipped away at my self-esteem until I felt utterly worthless. Stephen, meanwhile, was a passive observer, locked away in his room with his video games and music. His detachment left me isolated, bearing the brunt of his mother's venom alone. I missed my dad terribly and regretted every fight we'd ever had. It was my anger that had driven him away, and now I had no one to turn to. One day, feeling feverish, I lay down on the couch, hoping for a brief reprieve. Just as I was beginning to drift off, a sudden splash of icy water shocked me awake. Margaret stood over me, her face twisted with disdain. "What the hell are you doing on our couch? Did you get the groceries like I told you?" she barked. Too weak to argue, I didn't reply. "I see, you expect me to do all the work while you laze around? You devil," she spat, slapping me hard across the face before calling for Stephen. That was my breaking point. "I'm done," I shouted. "I won't be your punching bag anymore. Find someone else to torment because I'm leaving." But as I turned to go, something heavy struck the back of my head, and the world went dark. When I came to, I found myself in a dimly lit room. My head throbbed as I struggled to sit up. Where was I? The sound of approaching footsteps sent a chill down my spine. Crawling toward the noise, I reached a metal door with a small window. It creaked open, and there was Stephen, grinning cruelly. "Is my wife afraid of the dark?" he mocked. "Stephen, please let me out. This isn't funny," I begged, tears streaming down my face. "Shut up. This is what you get for disrespecting my mother. Maybe you'll learn to behave down here," he sneered. Desperation consumed me as he slammed the window shut, plunging me into darkness. Alone in the cold, I felt fear give way to anger. How had my life come to this? I reached into my pocket and felt the shattered remains of my phone. To my astonishment, the screen still flickered faintly. Trembling, I dialed the only person who might still care, my father. 3 agonizing days later, hope arrived in the form of a car pulling into the driveway. My heart raced as I heard firm footsteps approach the house. The door burst open, and there he was, my father. His presence was a beacon of strength and relief. He didn't come alone. The police followed him, storming into the house to confront Stephen and Margaret. Their protests were feeble, their lies transparent. "What have you done to my daughter, you monsters?" my father bellowed. "I was going to let her go, I swear," Stephen stammered, but his words fell on deaf ears. My father turned to him, his voice filled with disgust. "You're nothing but a coward. You will pay for what you've done." As I stepped out of that dark basement and into the sunlight, I felt a surge of determination. This ordeal had tested me, but it also revealed my strength and the power of unwavering love. I decided to leave Georgia and start anew in California with my dad. I vowed never to let anyone silence me again and to be more cautious in trusting others. The scars of this experience would remain, but they would serve as a reminder of my resilience and the promise of a brighter future ahead. Hello everyone, my name is Lisa. I'm 29 years old and currently living in Atlanta, Georgia, though I'm planning to move soon. Recently, I ended a difficult 1.5 year long marriage. It was a challenging time, but with my father's support and the intervention of the police, I managed to get through it. Looking back, I realize I should have been more cautious before accepting the proposal. I've always been shy and reserved, finding comfort in solitude. Most of my time is spent on my computer, immersed in the digital world. Occasionally, I'll visit a pub for a drink, but I'm uneasy around strangers and hesitant to form new friendships out of concern for my safety. My life changed significantly when I was 7. My mother passed away from an untreated heart condition, and from that moment on, my father, a mariner since his mid-20s, raised me. His job kept him away for long stretches, but he always stayed in touch through calls and letters. When my mother died, he returned home to comfort me. I still remember clinging to him at her funeral as he reassured me, "It's okay now, my little girl, Daddy's here." That night, I saw him cry on the couch. whispering to himself before burying his face in a cushion. It was only the second time I'd seen him cry. The first was when I was injured as a child, feeling responsible for our situation. He took 3 months off from sailing to care for me. Before his next voyage, he left me in my grandmother's care, encouraging me to help her and promising to return soon. Those early years of loss and resilience shaped me. I spent most of my time indoors, helping my grandmother and finding solace in books and, later, the internet. By the time I started college, my father sent me back to our old house. Adjusting was hard. I disliked campus life and struggled to connect with others in person. But online, I found confidence. The internet became my refuge, a place where I could express myself freely. I made friends from around the world, each with unique stories that showed me how interconnected we all are. It was here I met Steven, a content creator. We started chatting and eventually progressed to video calls. To keep my anonymity, I wore a Batman mask, and he covered his face with a scarf and beanie. "Hi Lisa, it's great to finally see you," Steven greeted during one of our calls. "Hello Steven, nice to meet you, virtually," I replied. "How are you feeling today? Have you chatted with many people?" he asked. "I'm okay, just a bit nervous," I admitted. "That's normal, don't worry, I'm just as awkward as you," he reassured me with a smile. As we talked, we discovered shared interests and exchanged stories. The connection felt natural, and I began to feel at ease. "Thanks for making this so effortless," I said. "The feeling's mutual. Lisa, you're great to talk to. Let's chat again sometime. I'm usually online playing Mario," he joked. Our conversations deepened over time, and though we only knew each other online, we formed a meaningful bond. Meanwhile, my father remained cautious about my online activities. Over dinner recently, he asked about my plans. "So, how are your studies, Dove?" he asked. "I've graduated, Dad," I replied, a hint of sharpness in my voice. "You wouldn't know, you weren't there." He sighed, looking regretful. "Oh, Lisa, I'm sorry, I know I missed a lot. I even emailed you saying I'd be there for your birthday." "Tomorrow's my pumpkin's birthday," he exclaimed, trying to lighten the mood. "Stop calling me names, Dad, I'm not a kid anymore. To me, you'll always be my little dove." "But seriously, what are your plans? Are you thinking of working?" "I'm not sure yet," I admitted. "What do you mean you're not sure? What are your friends up to these days?" His questions made me reflect on where my life is heading. While I'm uncertain about the future, I know that both the digital and real-world experiences have shaped me. For now, I'll take one step at a time, guided by the lessons I've learned along the way. "I don't have any friends, Dad," I finally admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. My dad sighed deeply. "Lisa, I didn't send you to live with your mom's family just so you could stay cooped up inside all day. There's a whole world out there, so many people you'll never meet if you don't step outside." "That's the problem," I said, exasperated. "I don't know how to." This exchange exposed the gulf between us, his world of tangible connections and mine, rooted in the digital realm. Still, I relented. "I'll try, okay? I do have friends, but they're all online." "Online friends?" Dad shook his head, disappointment creeping into his voice. "That's not how real friendships work, Lisa." I sighed, the weight of his disapproval pressing down on me. "Fine, how about this, we go out today, just you and me, shopping or something?" "That sounds like a start," he said, his tone softening. "You've got to push yourself, Lisa. This isn't living. I know it's been hard since Janice." "Why are you bringing Mom into this?" I snapped, anger bubbling to the surface. "What are you trying to say?" "I'm saying we've both been stuck in the past," he said gently, though his words stung. "We loved her, but we have to find a way forward, Lisa." His well-meaning words ignited something in me. I slammed my hands on the table, the clatter echoing in the room. "You don't understand me," I spat, standing abruptly. "Lisa, please, I'm trying to help you," Dad pleaded, his voice tinged with frustration and hurt. "You don't know everything about me, so stop pretending you do," I shouted before storming off, my emotions in turmoil. I retreated to my sanctuary, my room, my computer, and the reassuring presence of Steven on the other end of the screen. "Steven, you won't believe the argument I just had with my dad," I vented. "Tell me what happened," he replied, his voice calm and understanding. I poured out my frustrations, the sense of being misunderstood, my dad's inability to grasp why I found solace online. Steven listened patiently, never judging. "Hey," he said after a moment, "would you want to meet up sometime? We're both introverts, So it doesn't have to be anything big, just a quiet place where we can talk. His suggestion startled me. I'm not sure, it feels so sudden. I'd need time to think about it, I said, my voice hesitant. Take all the time you need, Stephen replied warmly. Whenever you're ready, you know where to find me. Here's my address. Why are you so kind to me? We're just strangers, I asked, confused by his unwavering support. Because I like you, Lisa, he admitted simply. You, like me? My voice wavered with disbelief. Yeah, he said softly, I'd like to get to know you better, and if you ever feel the same, I'm here. Meeting Stephen felt like a leap into the unknown, but one I knew I needed to take. Standing outside his house for the first time, my heart raced with a mix of excitement and apprehension. After a month of chatting online, I was about to step beyond the screen into a new chapter of my life. I was about to meet Stephen in person for the first time. Surprisingly, he lived just a 15-minute drive away. Taking a deep breath to calm my nerves, I knocked on the weathered wooden door. It creaked open, revealing Stephen's warm smile, which immediately put me at ease. Welcome to my humble abode. Your presence graces my domain, fair master, he joked, adding a playful touch of gamer lingo. I laughed softly. Some of that gaming talk might go over my head, but thank you. This place is cozy. Do you live here alone? I asked, glancing around at the neatly arranged space. Nope, fair princess, he replied with a grin. I live with my mom. She has the ground floor, and I've got the top floor all to myself. Come on, I'll give you the grand tour. Stephen's home wasn't extravagant, but it was charming and full of personality. Shelves lined with well-thumbed classics, a stack of board games, and a perfectly arranged computer setup painted a picture of someone genuine and thoughtful. His quirks, evident in every corner, made the space feel uniquely his. We spent the afternoon talking and laughing, discovering shared interests that deepened our connection beyond the digital realm. Meeting in person added a layer of closeness I hadn't anticipated. He was as kind and witty as he'd been online, and his easy humor made me feel at ease. As the sun began to set, Stephen suggested a walk in the nearby park. The cool breeze accompanied our conversation, which flowed seamlessly, dissolving any lingering nervousness. Wait, you didn't celebrate your birthday? He asked, surprised, during a lull in our talk. No, I admitted quietly, I didn't feel like it, especially after the argument with my dad. Stephen gave me a sympathetic look. I'm sorry to hear that. I'm sure he'll come around, he's your dad, after all. At first, his words seemed kind, soothing even, but over time, I realized there was an edge to his concern. What began as a blossoming relationship turned into something suffocating. As we started dating, Stephen's affection grew possessive. He wanted me constantly available, either talking to him on the phone or online. If I chatted with anyone else, he'd get angry, cloaking his jealousy with statements like, I just want to protect you. I believed him. Why did I believe him? His mother's disapproval only made things worse. Though she'd never met me, she dismissed me outright. The strain of knowing she didn't approve was compounded by Stephen's constant defense of her. Not every parent is perfect. Just look at your dad, he'd say. At least my mom cares about me. That hurts, Stephen, I'd reply, trying to make him see the damage his words caused. But you know I'm the one who loves you, right? Your dad doesn't love you like I do. Stop complaining about your life and try to compromise, he'd add, his tone more commanding than caring. When he suggested a secret wedding, I was too worn down to resist. Stephen convinced me that my dad wouldn't approve and didn't truly care about me. Blinded by what I thought was love, I went along with it, believing his assurances over my own instincts. Looking back, I wonder how I let it get so far. Each step I took closer to Stephen, I seemed to lose more of myself. I reluctantly agreed to marry him in a quiet, somber ceremony. Deep down, I knew it was a risk, but I felt trapped by my circumstances. You might think I was weak, but the weight of my upbringing and insecurities had shaped me, leaving me unsure of how to stand up for myself. I often blamed my inability to fight back on my own failings. In the months that followed, I began to see a side of his mother I hadn't anticipated, a side filled with cruelty and malice. Her every action seemed designed to make me miserable. It started with subtle, cutting remarks and escalated into relentless emotional torment. Is this supposed to be food? My son can't eat this mess. Make it again, you fool, she'd sneer. Why is this place so filthy? Are you blind? Her harsh words chipped away at my self-esteem until I felt utterly worthless. Stephen, meanwhile, was a passive observer. locked away in his room with his video games and music. His detachment left me isolated, bearing the brunt of his mother's venom alone. I missed my dad terribly and regretted every fight we'd ever had. It was my anger that had driven him away, and now I had no one to turn to. One day, feeling feverish, I lay down on the couch, hoping for a brief reprieve. Just as I was beginning to drift off, a sudden splash of icy water shocked me awake. Margaret stood over me, her face twisted with disdain. "What the hell are you doing on our couch? Did you get the groceries like I told you?" she barked. Too weak to argue, I didn't reply. "I see, you expect me to do all the work while you laze around? You devil," she spat, slapping me hard across the face before calling for Stephen. That was my breaking point. "I'm done," I shouted. "I won't be your punching bag anymore. Find someone else to torment because I'm leaving." But as I turned to go, something heavy struck the back of my head, and the world went dark. When I came to, I found myself in a dimly lit room. My head throbbed as I struggled to sit up. Where was I? The sound of approaching footsteps sent a chill down my spine. Crawling toward the noise, I reached a metal door with a small window. It creaked open, and there was Stephen, grinning cruelly. "Is my wife afraid of the dark?" he mocked. "Stephen, please let me out. This isn't funny," I begged, tears streaming down my face. "Shut up. This is what you get for disrespecting my mother. Maybe you'll learn to behave down here," he sneered. Desperation consumed me as he slammed the window shut, plunging me into darkness. Alone in the cold, I felt fear give way to anger. How had my life come to this? I reached into my pocket and felt the shattered remains of my phone. To my astonishment, the screen still flickered faintly. Trembling, I dialed the only person who might still care, my father. 3 agonizing days later, hope arrived in the form of a car pulling into the driveway. My heart raced as I heard firm footsteps approach the house. The door burst open, and there he was, my father. His presence was a beacon of strength and relief. He didn't come alone. The police followed him, storming into the house to confront Stephen and Margaret. Their protests were feeble, their lies transparent. "What have you done to my daughter, you monsters?" my father bellowed. "I was going to let her go, I swear," Stephen stammered, but his words fell on deaf ears. My father turned to him, his voice filled with disgust. "You're nothing but a coward. You will pay for what you've done." As I stepped out of that dark basement and into the sunlight, I felt a surge of determination. This ordeal had tested me, but it also revealed my strength and the power of unwavering love. I decided to leave Georgia and start anew in California with my dad. I vowed never to let anyone silence me again and to be more cautious in trusting others. The scars of this experience would remain, but they would serve as a reminder of my resilience and the promise of a brighter future ahead.